Chapter 1360. Floating in the air, Obsidian had a playful look on his face. The 3 generations Naruto who had just attacked him was lying on the ground, constantly vomiting blood, and there was a huge depression in his chest. It seems that a huge force directly crushed his sternum. The 3 generations of Tsuchikage were bleeding from their heads, leaning to the side, gasping for breath. The slightly weaker 4 generations of Kazekage and 4 generations of Laying both fell in a pool of blood. Only the slight rise and fall of their chests prove that these 2 Kage who once stood at the peak of the shinobi world still have a breath. Jiraiya, who fought the most fiercely, had his shoulder and right leg broken. If it wasn't for Orochimaru helping him, he would have already died. On the other side, 2nd-generation Naruto and 4 generations of Naruto's Edo body are slowly recovering. In the fierce battle just now, their Edo body was shattered again. Kakashi, Richa, Asuma, Kunai, Mute, and other Jonin were all lying on the ground. Some were still conscious, and some had fallen into a coma. Guy, who had opened the Hashiman Tonku formation because he had just barely used the esoteric evening elephant, at this moment he was completely exhausted and fell alone in a huge pit. The other Jonin and Chunin who joined the battle suffered heavy casualties. Some of the weaker ones even had incomplete corpses. The whole battlefield was filled with a pungent smell of blood. Tsunade, one of the Sannin, cooperated with Slug to rescue those who were still alive. The only ones who could still stand on the entire battlefield were Orochimaru, Sasuke, and Naruto. Although Orochimaru was also severely injured, he was in the best condition out of all of them because his body had been modified. Sasuke and Naruto were panting heavily. They were both injured. It was obvious that the chaotic battle just now was very tragic. The strength of the tomb clone is almost the same as the main body. Moreover, the tomb clone also has the ability to become invisible. Therefore, even if the Shinobi Alliance attacked together, they couldn't hurt the Obsidian who has fallen into Izanami. Reality was just so cruel. The gap between the two sides was so big that even if Obsidian fell into the illusion, the allied ninja army would not be able to hurt Obsidian at all. Obsidian glanced at Orochimaru, Sasuke, and Naruto, who were still standing on the battlefield. Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, with 3 loud bangs, Orochimaru, Sasuke, and Naruto were instantly hit and sent flying. Obsidian immediately shook his hand, and a black stick came out of his sleeve. He held in his hand and pointed it at Orochimaru. "You dare to appear in front of me? You're courting death." Swish with that, the masked man threw his black rod at Seiji. Orochimaru, who was seriously injured by the tomb clone and fell to the ground, saw the black stick flying towards him. His pupils shrank. He had just experienced the power of Obsidian's black stick. Once hit, the chakra in his body would immediately fall into disorder. No matter how many secret and forbidden techniques he had, he would be nailed to the ground like a mortal and unable to move. "Be careful!" Jiraiya and Tsunade cried out. However, they were also seriously injured at the moment and could not rescue him in time. Clang! Just as the black stick was about to hit Orochimaru, several figures flashed in a battlefield and stood in front of Orochimaru, blocking the black stick that was flying towards Orochimaru. The people who suddenly joined the battlefield were none other than Do, Kimimaro, Yugo, and Yamato. "Orochimaru-sama." The 4 of them bowed to Orochimaru. Tsunade and Jiraiya suddenly looked surprised, and immediately a look of realization appeared on their faces as they understood that Orochimaru was the mastermind behind the Sound Village. Swish, swish, swish. Then a large number of ninjas arrived on the battlefield one after another. Among them were Mist Village's Mei, Aoi, Mizuko, Rock Village's Deadale, Black Earth, Cloud Village's Druid, Samui, Sand Village's Pakura, Zyro, and other experts. These ninjas were either stationed in other defense areas or performing other tasks. At this moment, they were all mobilized by the general command and rushed to this main battlefield. Looking at the mess in front of them and the battlefield full of corpses, although everyone was horrified, They also knew that as a member of the ninja, there was no way back for them, so all of them were united. After a silent confrontation for a moment, someone shouted, and then the ninjas swarmed toward Obsidian again. "Humph!" Mask 2 sneered, and then he spread his arms and activated the Shinra Tensei Crusade. Rumble! In an instant, a huge repulsive force spread in all directions like storm. In the blink of an eye, countless ninjas who rushed toward Obsidian were swallowed by the storm. Kacha! At this time, a crisp sound came from the ground under Obsidian's feet. Then, Deidara sprang out from the ground and arrived in front of Obsidian. He spread his palms, and a beam of light suddenly appeared. But before the beam of light shot out from dust release, Obsidian grabbed Deidara's throat and said with a smile, "Naive guy." Before his voice faded away, Deidara's body swelled up. Obsidian froze for a moment and said, "Clay clone." Boom! A huge explosion came out, and the soaring flames submerged Obsidian. But when the smoke dispersed, Obsidian, who was at the center of the explosion, was still unscathed. Deidara's scream came from not far away. Obviously, Obsidian's tomb clone had found Deidara's main body. Swish! Suddenly, Deidara, who had activated the lightning release chakra mode, passed through the smoke like a lightning bolt and fiercely punched Obsidian. Obsidian casually raised his hand and effortlessly caught Deidara's full blow. Deidara was shocked and said, "How is this possible?" Baidu turned around and kicked Darui away. Then, his figure flashed and appeared in front of Mei Ming, who was in the middle of forming hand seals. He punched Mei Ming's lower abdomen. Then his figure flashed again and appeared in front of another target. Bang, bang, bang. After a dozen breaths, almost all the ninja army that had just rushed over fell to the ground. Only a few were left standing. At this time, a figure slowly walked into the field. Obsidian, who was aware of something, turned his head and saw that the person walking over was none other than the leader of the original Akatsuki organization, Nagato, whom he had always treated as a tool. Obsidian said lightly, "Why bother?" Nagato, who was wearing the red cloud uniform of the Akatsuki organization, said coldly, "Traitor." Obsidian shook his head and said, "Poor guy." While sighing, he secretly ordered a tomb clone to pounce on Nagato. At this time, he no longer put Nagato in his eyes and did not even have the thought of personally taking action. But just when Obsidian's tomb clone was about to hit Nagato, the whites of Nagato's eyes suddenly changed. At the same time, Nagato's figure flashed and easily dodged the attack of the tomb clone. Here's the second update, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Also, I would like to thank the students who gave me gifts today. N. Chapter 1361. The Obsidian, who was about to move his gaze away, abruptly froze. Never had he imagined that the attack of his Samsara clone would actually be avoided by Nagato. After all, the speed and strength of the Mausoleum clone was practically exactly similar to his main body. Coupled with the peerless spatial concealment ability of the Mausoleum clone, even a bystander would be unable to see through it. So it was absolutely impossible for Nagato to successfully dodge at this time to be a coincidence. In the blink of an eye, Obsidian noticed that the whites of Nagato's eyes had undergone an inexplicable change. The part of the eyeball had become a deep grayish black, and the pupil in the center of the eyeball had become a faint blue that shone with a halo. It had completely lost the characteristic of the previous white eyes. What kind of eyes are these? Pausing for a moment, Obsidian thought to himself, could it be that this pair of eyes can see through my Luan Mu clone? The doppelganger created by the pupil technique, Luan Tomb Edge Prison, doesn't have optical invisibility in the traditional sense, but a special kind of spatial invisibility. In short, the Luan Tomb doppelganger normally moves in a different space called Luan Tomb space, and because it's not in the shinobi world, it's very difficult to perceive it. And once the Luan Mu clone wants to launch an attack, the Luan Mu space will overlap with the shinobi world for a short period of time, and the things in the two different spaces will have the ability to interfere with each other. Therefore, whether it is the Sharingan, Byakugan, or other Kekiai limit technique, or the various perception ninjutsu of perception-type ninjas, all of them are ineffective against the Lun clone. Currently, in the shinobi world, only the Rinnegan, Tenseigan, and Rinnegan can see through the Lun Toon clone, as well as the vague malice perception after entering Sage mode. Because of this, when he sensed that Nagato could see through his Lun Mu clone, the Obsidian's nerves immediately tensed up. This pair of eyes is probably not simple. When a Ninja Coalition army saw Nagato in the Akatsuki Red Cloud suit, all of them trembled. Just one Obsidian alone is enough to sweep the battlefield, and if the Akatsuki leader Nagato is added to the mix, then the already slim chance of winning will be even slimmer. However, things soon took a turn for the better. Through the conversation between Nagato and Obsidian, everyone found out that the Akatsuki organization has an internal conflict. The mysterious Uchiha, who has the name of Uchiha Madara, betrayed the leader of the Akatsuki organization, Nagato. In this way, Nagato, the powerful leader of the Akatsuki, has become a force that the allied forces can rely on. After all, the enemy of the enemy can become an ally, even if it's only temporary. Just like Obsidian, Orochimaru observed the strange eyes in Nagato's eye sockets while ordering his subordinates around him. This may be our last chance to win. You guys assist Nagato to deal with that guy. Yes. Do, Kimimaro, Yugo, and Yamato all nodded in unison. Orochimaru subconsciously licked his lips again. If there's a chance, I want to take both of their eyes. Listening to Orochimaru's words, Jiraiya and Tsunade on the side were helpless. They didn't expect that Orochimaru was still thinking about the enemy's eyes at this time. On the other side, Kakashi staggered to Naruto and Sasuke's side and asked, "Are you two okay?" "Pooh," Sasuke spat out blood and said coldly, "I'm okay." In the battle just now, his Susanoo was also shattered by Obsidian's Latomu clone, so he suffered a lot of pupil power. In addition, when he fought with Madara Uchiha's impure earth body, he consumed a lot of pupil power. If it weren't for the Hashirama cell's transplant and the baptism of the Grell mineral vein, his body wouldn't have been able to support it. Kakashi looked at Naruto again. Naruto shook his head and drove away the dizziness caused by the overdraft of chakra. He gritted his teeth and said, "Sensei Kakashi, I can still hold on." Seeing that Sasuke and Naruto were already like an arrow at the end of its flight, Kakashi's expression became gloomy, and he advised, "Take this opportunity to escape." Escape? Sasuke and Naruto looked at Kakashi together, and their eyes were full of surprise. They didn't expect that the words of escape would come from Kakashi, the agent of Naruto. Kakashi explained, "You are the last hope of the village. I don't want geniuses like you to die here." Sasuke gritted his teeth. "That guy hurt my brother and father like this. If I don't get rid of him, I won't run away with my tail between my legs." Kakashi raised his eyebrows. "Your brother?" He had been observing the situation, but he had never seen Itachi Uchiha appear on the battlefield. At this time, a golden fox head popped out from Naruto's body and said to everyone, "It's useless to escape. 10 Tails can detect my traces, and the other party also has the strange time-space ninjutsu. It's useless no matter where we escape to." Kakashi pondered and said, "I could try to send you further away." Nine Tails glanced at Kakashi. "You?" Nine Tails had long sensed that there was not much chakra left in Kakashi's body. If Kakashi uses the Flying Thunder God technique alone to escape, it is possible, but if he wants to take away Naruto and Sasuke together, it is pure nonsense. Sasuke saw Nine Tails take the initiative to appear and said, "Do you have any way?" Nine Tails looked at Obsidian in the distance and said solemnly, "Now, only by using that taboo technique, there is a possibility of turning defeat into victory." "What taboo technique?" Sasuke, Naruto, and Kakashi all looked at Nine Tails. Nine Tails didn't talk nonsense and said bluntly, "It is the taboo technique that Uchiha Madara used against the first-generation Naruto called Beast Disaster." As she spoke, Nine-Tail described the Beast Disaster in detail. Beast Disaster, the taboo technique that Uchiha Madara once used, is actually a combination of the complete Susanoo and the completely liberated state of Nine Tails. The reason why Nine Tails mentioned this technique now is that Uchiha Madara controlled it through Jinjutsu and regarded it purely as a tool. This could be seen from the obviously insulting name of Affliction of the Beast. Therefore, the Nine-Tailed Beast was very resistant to this technique. However, the current situation was critical, and it could not think of any other way to break out of the predicament. After listening to the description of Nine Tails, Sasuke and Naruto looked at each other. One of them can use the complete Susa, and the other can enter the Nine Lama mode, completely liberating Nine Tails, so this technique seems to be tailor-made for the two of them. Kakashi's expression also moved. Great, Nine Tails said at this time. But if you want to turn defeat into victory, you still need a premise. First, please recommend votes, monthly votes. Chapter 1362. Sasuke, who was already somewhat eager to try, quickly asked, "What prerequisites?" After a slight hesitation, Nine Tails said, "I'm afraid that relying on beast affliction alone is not enough. We must integrate natural energy and use immortal jutsu in it. Only then will we have a chance of winning. Ordinary ninjutsu can't even pass the test of truth-seeking ball. Although beast affliction is a combination of Susanoo perfect form and Nine Tails perfect form, it is a taboo technique in the ninja world, but it still doesn't jump out of the category of ordinary ninjutsu. Because neither Sasuke nor Naruto have the power of the sixth path, if they want to cause damage to the truth-seeking ball, they must integrate a large amount of natural energy and use the immortal jutsu that the truth-seeking ball can't melt as a foundation to try to break the defense of the truth-seeking ball. In addition, if they don't use immortal jutsu, neither Sasuke nor Naruto have the ability to detect Obsidian's Luen Luen clone. At that time, even if they use beast affliction, they will still be a live target in front of Obsidian's Luen Luen clone. Sasuke didn't take it seriously and said, "Doesn't Naruto know immortal jutsu? What's so difficult about it?" Without waiting for Nine Tails to answer, Naruto shook his head and said gloomily, "When I enter Sage mode, I can't activate Nine Lama mode, and once I use Nine Lama mode, I can't enter Sage mode. There is no doubt that for the current Naruto, he still can't completely integrate the immortal Jutsu Chakra and Nine Tails Chakra. He can't integrate Sage mode and Nine Lama mode and activate Nine Lama Sage mode, which is Immortal Fox mode." Kakashi's expression darkened. He had already expected this, because Naruto has never used Sage mode and Nine Tails Chakra mode at the same time. Sasuke recalled for a moment and came to a realization. Nine Tails said, "If you can't do that, even if you join forces and use Beast Affliction, you won't be able to do anything to the opponent." Sasuke quickly looked at Naruto and opened his mouth, but no words came out. This was because he knew better than anyone the difficulty of cultivating immortal techniques. He himself could not even grasp an immortal technique, so he was in no position to ask Naruto to grasp the even more difficult Immortal Fox mode. Naruto glanced at the corpse-strewn battlefield, then looked at Naruto Rock in the distance. He looked at the sculptures of Naruto on Naruto Rock, and his gaze gradually became solemn. "I can definitely do it. All right." Sasuke nodded. Without any superfluous words, Sasuke and Naruto simply looked at each other and understood each other's determination. Then, while accumulating chakra, they looked at the battlefield. On the battlefield, Nagato slowly walked towards Obsidian. Obsidian's attention seemed to be completely attracted by Nagato's strange eyes. He was not in a hurry to launch a new attack, but looked at Nagato with interest. Both sides did not speak again, because the grievances between them could not be resolved by words alone. As the distance between the two narrowed, the atmosphere on the battlefield became tense again. Although Nagato had lost his Rinnegan, his powerful image as the leader of the Akatsuki made everyone not dare to underestimate him. Coupled with the strange eyes in his eye sockets, everyone was also doubtful about Nagato's strength. Obsidian frowned slightly and coldly snorted. "Do you still think you're the leader of the Akatsuki? Humph! Not to mention you. Even if Yama comes, he is not my opponent." After saying that, Obsidian no longer hesitated and directly urged the tomb clone to rush forward. Just now, he did not launch an attack and let Nagato slowly walk towards him. In addition to observing the pair of eyes in Nagato's eye sockets, his tomb clone must return to the main body every once in a while, and then it can split again and act alone. So, in a short confrontation just now, he was doing this. Seeing that Obsidian urged the tomb clone to rush over, Nagato immediately formed a seal with his hands, ready to attack. Not only could he see Obsidian's tomb clone, but he was also very familiar with the eye technique tomb border prison. After all, when the Rinnegan was in his eye sockets, this technique was his trump card, so before he appeared, he had already thought about how to deal with Obsidian's tomb clone. Swish! In a split second, one of Obsidian's tomb clone rushed in front of Nagato, and at the same time, there were two other tomb clones, one on the left and one on the right, closing in on Nagato. Vajra Seal! Nagato suddenly shouted, and countless golden chains glowing with a halo gushed out of his body. These chains seemed to have a mind of their own, like venomous snakes hunting for prey. In the blink of an eye, they firmly entangled the three tomb clones that were rushing towards Nagato from three different directions. Obviously, Nagato was very clear about the power of the tomb clones. He did not go head-on against the tomb clones just because he had the sixth Dao immortal body, but used this sealing technique of the Maelstrom clan to imprison the tomb clones. Obsidian's expression changed slightly, and he raised his hand to use the 10,000 nature summoning, trying to rescue the three tomb clones that were entangled by the Vajra seal. However, before Obsidian could use his eye technique, Nagato, who had just used the Vajra seal, quickly formed a seal and shouted, "Tree world descend." Rumble. In an instant, in a burst of earth-shaking roars, countless trees were uprooted and grew wildly. Some vines even shot out and attacked Obsidian from all directions. Seeing this, Obsidian had to change his mind and changed the 10,000 nature summoning he was going to use to Shinra Tenseigan. Boom! A huge repulsive force was formed again, and with Obsidian as the center, it suddenly spread in all directions. The sea of trees that was growing wildly could not stop this repulsive force at all, and were flattened. Standing in the dust, Obsidian snorted disdainfully. However, at this moment, a figure pierced through the dust and pounced towards Obsidian. With a thought, Obsidian directly drove a truth-seeking jade that was floating beside him to meet the figure. Clang! The expected melting did not happen. On the contrary, when the truth-seeking jade collided with the figure in the dust, there was an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing. Immediately after, the figure that blocked the truth-seeking jade passed through the dust and appeared in Obsidian's sight. Kimimaro from the Sound Ninja Village. Obsidian was slightly stunned before he recognized the other party. This was because Kimimaro had already activated the Earth Sigil. Not only had his body turned black, but he also had a long tail behind him. At the same time, because Kimimaro had activated the sigil, his body was filled with natural energy, and he was barely able to resist the truth-seeking jade. Just as Obsidian was about to wave his staff to meet the figure, the ground under his feet seemed to have come to life, and crisscross spikes grew out of it, imprisoning him on the spot. Here's the second update, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Also, I would like to thank all the students who gifted me today. Thank you all. Chapter 1363. Obsidian was slightly surprised by the sudden appearance of the stone spikes on the ground. At his level, no matter how fast the ninjutsu was used, he could more or less sense the fluctuation of chakra. However, when the stone spikes suddenly appeared, he couldn't sense the fluctuation of chakra at all. This isn't a normal Earth release ninjutsu. Although he realized this, he didn't panic. He gave up on the idea of fighting back and waited for Kimimaro to attack. Clang! Kimimaro rushed towards Obsidian with all his might. The sharp bone blade in his hand slashed at Obsidian's staff, and an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing could be heard. The moment the two collided, Kimimaro's expression froze. This was because his all-out attack seemed to have collided with a hard boulder. No, it was steel that was even harder than a boulder. His ferocious attack was stopped in an instant. The huge impact was like a clay ox entering the sea, not stirring up even the slightest ripple. Immediately after, the huge impact hit him, and the bone blade in his hand broke with a kacha sound. He was sent flying without any resistance. Boom! Kimimaro, who had fallen to the ground, didn't care about his bleeding head. He looked at Obsidian in surprise. He had always been confident in his physical skills. Just now, he didn't hold back at all, and he used the power of his bone vein and seal of the earth to the extreme. He thought that in terms of strength, he wasn't weaker than anyone. However, not only did his all-out attack not cause any damage to Obsidian, it didn't even push Obsidian back half a step. At this time, Obsidian waved his staff, and the stone spikes that bound his body were all shattered. Then, he stomped on the ground with his left foot. In an instant, Yamato's blood-curdling screams came from underground not far away. It was obvious that Yamato, who was hiding underground and preparing to attack Obsidian, was discovered by Obsidian, and he was injured with a casual kick. Oof. With a light snort, Obsidian scanned the surroundings with rapt attention, trying to find traces of Nagato through the smoke and dust that filled the air. Swoosh! At this moment, a dragon-shaped shadow carrying a ball of light shot towards him. Obsidian glanced sideways and casually activated a truth-seeking jade beside him. However, before the truth-seeking jade could hit the ball of light exploded about 10 meters away from the Obsidian, shooting out a blinding white light. In an instant, the night sky seemed to be illuminated by this white light. Not only that, but at the same time as it shot out the dazzling light, there was a violent and rapid tremor coming from the ball of light. The sharp sound waves formed visible ripples in the smoke and dust, rapidly expanding. Being disturbed by the sudden strong light and sound waves, even the 6th Daos level Obsidian felt obvious discomfort. He subconsciously closed his eyes and covered his ears. Even so, the powerful sound waves continued to assault his body, shaking him to the point where his blood and chi surged and his entire body became numb. Without a doubt, this was one of Do's ultimate skills, the white stimulation technique. It was a high-level immortal technique that used the sound waves created by strong light and friction to disturb the enemy, depriving the enemy of sight, hearing, and even touch for a period of time. If the enemy's strength was weak, it could even directly paralyze the enemy's body, causing them to completely lose the ability to move. Itachi and Sasuke, who were hit by this technique in the original space and time, found it extremely difficult to maintain the Susanoo, let alone launch an immediate counterattack. They were completely in a passive position. Swoosh! Just when the Obsidian was affected by the white stimulation technique, Nagato jumped into the range of the white stimulation technique, resisting the impact of the strong light and sound waves, gritted his teeth, and launched the King Kong lock. In an instant, several golden chains shot out from Nagato's body and entangled the Obsidian. As a 6th Daos level Obsidian, his adaptability was far better than ordinary ninjas. Although the strong light and sound waves created by the white stimulation technique were still there, he gradually began to adapt and open his eyes. Seeing the golden chains whistling towards him, the Obsidian hesitated. He was originally prepared to defeat Nagato head-on, to let Nagato know who the real leader of Akatsuki is, who is the strongest person in the world, but after all, he is not Madara Uchiha. He does not have the arrogance of Madara Uchiha. He has been used to being cautious and used to retreat. Coupled with the interference of the white stimulation technique and the fear of the strange eyes in Nagato's eye sockets, he finally decided to turn invisible and chose to temporarily avoid the attack. Swish, swish, swish. Several golden chains instantly pierced through Baitu's illusory body. The Obsidian, who was forced to temporarily avoid the attack, had a fierce look on his face as if he was ready to give Nagato a fierce blow to declare his dignity as the strongest ninja in the world. But at this moment, the strange eyes in Nagato's eye sockets suddenly bloomed with a strange brilliance. The obsidian's face suddenly sank. He felt an unknown pupil power was interfering with his Kamui. And almost at the same time, the golden chains that originally pierced through the body unexpectedly penetrated the space barrier, pursued Obsidian's Kamui space, and firmly entangled Obsidian in the Kamui state. Obsidian, who was entangled by the golden chains, was taken aback. He quickly looked down and found that he was still in the invincible Kamui state and immediately understood. His eyes can not only see through my Kamui incarnation, but also interfere with my time and space ninjutsu? What kind of eyes are these? Is it also the Tenseigan? Before Obsidian could further diverge his thoughts, he felt a powerful sealing force coming from the golden chains that entangled him. Then, from the corner of his eyes, he found that Nagato, who was rushing towards him, was still making hand seals, and the hand seals seemed to be the most legendary forbidden technique of the Uzumaki clan, Corpse Demon Seal. He wants to die with me. Looking at Nagato's determined face, the Obsidian was stunned. He was very clear about the tyranny of the sealing technique. The legendary ancestor of chakra, Otsutsuki Kagaya, was unable to resist the seal, so even though he had entered the Six Paths level and belonged to the category of immortals beyond the mortal world, he still did not dare to take the risk. What's more, Nagato's eyes were too strange, which made him very afraid. So, without waiting for Nagato to approach and use Corpse Demon Seal, he exploded the power of the Six Paths and forcibly broke free from the Vajra Seal. Then, at the moment when Nagato summoned the Shinigami, he exchanged places with the remaining Kamui incarnation not far away and disappeared in a thin air in front of Nagato. I'm asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 1364. Nagato, who was pouncing forward, had already completed the ghoul sealing technique. Behind him, there was even a faint shadow of the Grim Reaper. But at this moment, the chains of his Vajra sealing technique suddenly loosened and tightened. The target had disappeared without a trace. The opportunity that was just a step away was wasted just like that. The depression in his heart was indescribable. Actually, he knew that the Luan Tomb border prison could create 4 doppelgangers, but he had only sealed 3 previously. Therefore, Obsidian still had 1 Luan Tomb doppelganger to move around. But it was impossible to seal 4 Luan Tomb doppelgangers at once, because Obsidian would not be stupid enough to let the 4 Luan Tomb doppelgangers attack together. And the opportunity, just now, was very rare. Therefore, Nagato gambled everything. He wanted to die together with Obsidian before Obsidian could react. But while the white stimulation technique affected Obsidian, it also affected him. Under the strong light and sound waves of the white stimulation technique, it was difficult for him to even open his eyes. His body was in a state of severe numbness. Therefore, he was able to use the Vajra sealing technique and use his ocular power to interfere with Obsidian's divine might. He had already risked his life. Therefore, the follow-up ghoul sealing technique was not able to catch up in time, giving Obsidian a chance to react. 1 step slower, every step slower. Nagato understood that there was only one chance to win by surprise. Next time, when Obsidian was on guard, it would be extremely difficult for him to succeed. In addition, the impact of the white stimulation technique on his body and the backlash of the ghoul sealing technique without a target caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood. On the other side, Obsidian, who had switched places with the Luan Tomb doppelganger, suddenly turned his head and stared fiercely at Nagato. Being forced by Nagato to use the void form, and Mausoleum Clone's spatial displacement caused him to feel extremely embarrassed, and for a moment, he was slightly angry from embarrassment. However, just as he was about to attack and deal a fatal blow to Nagato, a huge wave of chakra energy behind him attracted his attention. He looked sideways and saw a Susanoo that was 100 meters tall, standing up. Then, the golden 9 tails were completely released, revealing a huge figure. The terrifying chakra of the complete form Isuno and the completely liberated 9 tails rapidly skyrocketed, as if it had a substance, illuminating the sky that had just darkened due to the failure of the white stimulation spell. Facing such a scene, the Obsidian's expression remained unchanged. As long as it was not a sealing technique, he did not put ordinary ninjutsu in his eyes, even if it was a calamity-level existence like the complete form Susanoo and the Nine Tails. However, when Obsidian was about to look away, the complete form Susanoo and the Nine Tails actually fused together, turning into a half-human, half-fox mighty Susanoo with a long blade in his hand. The inside was golden, the outside was purple Susanoo armor, and it had 9 tails. Obsidian's eyes turned cold. After the complete form Susanoo and the 9 tails fused together, the chakra energy soared again, to the extent that he could not help but be surprised. At this time, Sasuke, who was in the mighty Susanoo, shouted, "Naruto!" Yes, Naruto nodded heavily, then clasped his hands together. In an instant, the face of Naruto, who was in the 9 Lama mode, changed slightly, and the chakra on his body also changed from a normal tailed beast chakra to a celestial fox chakra, full of natural energy. In a desperate situation, the growth of Naruto and Sasuke was very amazing. This was especially so for Naruto, the prophecy child in the Great Toad Sage's prophecy. The more adverse and desperate the situation was, the more it could stimulate his fighting spirit, as well as the power hidden in his bloodline and spirit body. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the Celestial Fox mode, which required continuous practice and continuous attempts to master, was used by him in just a few minutes. As Naruto's Celestial Fox mode was activated, a large amount of natural energy swarmed in, pouring into the mighty Susanoo that he and Sasuke had fused together, making the already terrifying mighty Susanoo even more terrifying. What kind of power is this? Looking up, Orochimaru's face was full of shock. The injured Jiraiya's face was also full of horror. This is too shocking. In the distance, Itachi, Jishui, Shinichi, and the others who were also injured on the ground were also stunned for a moment, unable to hide the shock in their eyes. They didn't expect that the combination of Susanoo and 9 Tails could burst out such a terrifying power. Rumble, at this moment, the mighty Susanoo that Naruto and Sasuke had fused together took a step forward and took a stance in the shaking of the earth. Then, without the slightest hesitation, it fiercely slashed at Obsidian. Whoosh! Before the blade arrived, a huge storm came first, blowing so hard that Obsidian's cheeks hurt. But this time, Obsidian didn't hesitate and once again entered the state of nihility, tried to avoid the full blow of Naruto and Sasuke's mighty Susanoo through the mighty Susanoo. But at the moment when Obsidian was nihility, a golden chain pierced through the smoke, not only tied him up in the nihility, but also pulled him back from the narrow gap between the nihility space and the shinobi world back to the shinobi world. At the same time, the ground under his feet seemed to be alive, suddenly rising rapidly, quickly closing the distance between him and the blade. Obsidian's face froze. In the confrontation just now, although he avoided Nagato's corpse demon seal, he also gave his last Luan Tomb doppelganger to Nagato. So, at this moment, his forlorn Tomb doppelganger had been locked by Nagato's diamond seal, unable to move at will. And now that he was pulled out of the nihility state by Nagato, he could only take the blade of Naruto and Sasuke's mighty Susanoo with all their strength. Damn it! After cursing, Obsidian hurriedly activated the truth-seeking ball in front of him to protect himself. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, the prepared second-generation Naruto, fourth-generation Naruto, and Kakashi appeared one after another. They used the Flying Thunder God technique to forcibly remove the few truth-seeking balls around Obsidian. Obsidian's face darkened, but his hands didn't slow down at all. He hurriedly changed the staff in his hand back into the truth-seeking ball and turned it into a black ball that completely covered his body. Boom! Under the cooperation of Nagato, Medicine Master Do, second-generation Naruto, fourth-generation Naruto, and Kakashi, Naruto, and Sasuke's mighty Susanoo, with all their strength finally slashed on Obsidian's truth-seeking ball with a loud bang without any obstruction. This attack that carried everyone's last hope was finally completed. Here's the second update. asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 1365. Boom! When Naruto and Sasuke Susanoo hit the shield of Obsidian's truth-seeking ball with all their strength, a huge roar suddenly broke out. At the same time, the dazzling light spread out in all directions like a storm, instantly sweeping the entire battlefield. In this turbulent storm, all the surviving ninjas on the battlefield are like a small boat in the raging waves. They're so small that they can only drift with the waves. Although they were swept by the storm and even blown away, the surviving ninjas' faces were full of smiles. They were full of hope for this blow. This was not only because Naruto and Sasuke Susanoo was indeed shockingly strong after fusing, but also because this was their only hope now. After a while, the air wave dissipated and the smoke and dust rolled. After this blow, the already messy battlefield became even more chaotic. Naruto and Sasuke's Susanoo slashed with all their strength, leaving a gully hundreds of meters long and tens of meters deep on the battlefield. And the place where Obsidian originally stood became a huge pit. Did it work? 3 generations of Naruto relied on the Diamond Wishful Staff and barely stood up. However, because of his heavy injuries, he couldn't jump several times, so he couldn't see the scene in the deep pit, so he couldn't confirm whether Obsidian was defeated or not. 3 generations of Tsuchikage, 4 generations of Kazekage, and 4 generations of Laying gradually recovered under the treatment of Tsunade and Slug, but because of their heavy injuries, they couldn't stand, let alone move. They could only try their best to stretch their necks, trying to see clearly. Deadale, Druid, Mei, Itachi, Shinichi, and Shursui were scattered around the battlefield, and all the injured ninjas were looking at the huge pit with expectant expressions. On the other side, Orochimaru, whose injuries were light, wanted to see what was going on. Medicine Do, who had been hiding in the dark, quickly appeared in front of Orochimaru and volunteered. Orochimaru-sama, let me go. Orochimaru nodded, go. Jiraiya and Tsunade on the side saw this scene, and their expressions were a bit complicated. They didn't expect that Orochimaru, as a traitorous ninja, not only secretly created a ninja village, but also cultivated strong ninjas such as Medicine Do, Kimimaro, Haku, and so on. Although they enjoyed the resources of the largest ninja village in the shinobi world, they didn't cultivate any powerful talents. Jiraiya was still okay. At least he cultivated 4 generations. Naruto, who was strong enough to compete with strong ninjas such as Medicine Do, Kimimaro, and Haku cultivated by Orochimaru, but Tsunade, the princess of Mai, really didn't have any good disciples. It can be said that in the matter of cultivating talents, Tsunade failed miserably. Just as Yakashoku slowly approached the giant pit, Naruto and Sasuke also stared at the giant pit with rapt attention. Sasuke activated the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan in his eye sockets with all his might. It's just that the huge pit was located in the center of the attack just now, and the smoke was the thickest, so even with the Manjikyu Sharingan, Sasuke couldn't determine the situation in the pit for a while. Kacha! Suddenly, there was a cracking sound coming from the deep pit. Although the cracking sound was not loud, it was especially eye-catching when everyone was holding their breaths in rapt attention. Whoosh! A gust of night wind blew at the right time, blowing away the smoke in the deep pit. Naruto and Sasuke quickly looked at the huge pit, only to see that the black ball formed by the truth-seeking ball was still in the center of the huge pit. And the cracking sound just now was the sound of the black ball breaking. Still not broken through the truth-seeking ball. Sasuke was stunned for a moment, and a huge sense of frustration surged in his heart. The black ball formed by the truth-seeking ball was still there, which meant that their full-strength attack just now still couldn't penetrate Obsidian's defense. Even if the black ball was breaking now, it couldn't change this fact. Naturally, Naruto also realized this, but he didn't give up. He immediately shouted, "Sasuke, let's do it again." Encouraged by Naruto, Sasuke nodded. Okay. Whoosh. However, just as Naruto and Sasuke were about to drive the Susuke to slash again, a figure suddenly jumped out of the deep pit and flew towards their Susuk. What? Naruto and Sasuke were both shocked. Without a doubt, the person who suddenly attacked was none other than the annoyed Obsidian. Flying in the air, he was like a tiny insect facing a giant as he faced the immeasurably huge Susa. Even so, he simply reached out with his right hand and pulled, and a huge twisting vortex appeared before the Susa's chest, instantly twisting and shredding the armor on the front of the Susa. In an instant, Obsidian invaded the interior of the Susuk through the hole. Sasuke immediately pulled out the Kusanagi no Tsurugi from his waist and faced the attack. However, Obsidian's figure flickered and directly disappeared from his Manjikyu Sharingan's vision. So fast, Sasuke was shocked. His opponent's speed was completely beyond his expectations. Bang! Before Sasuke could recover, he felt a piercing pain in his back. Immediately, his whole body was like a kite without a string, and he was suddenly hit and sent flying. Be careful. At this time, Naruto's warning came out. Obsidian, who had dealt with Sasuke, did not stop for a moment. His figure flickered again and appeared in front of Naruto. He stabbed one hand into Naruto's chest and instantly pulled out 9 tails. Boom! As Sasuke and Naruto were dealt with one after another, the majestic Susuk that stood on the battlefield suddenly collapsed in a loud noise. This change happened in an instant. Pharmacisto, who was close to the huge pit, noticed it and hurriedly tried to hide his body. However, when he was about to pull out and hide, he found that a distorted vortex suddenly appeared on his body. The numbness caused by the time-space ninjutsu immediately attacked his whole body. He was shocked and knew that he had been targeted by Obsidian, so he decisively activated the immortal art, inorganic reincarnation, and pierced his body through the earth spike. At the cost of half of his body being spread by the distorted vortex, he escaped with blood dripping from his body. Ow! On the other side, Nagato, who was panting heavily, was shocked. He did not expect that the situation would collapse in an instant. When he was about to use the ocular sorcery to lock on to Obsidian's trace, there was a swoosh, and an arm pierced his body from behind and reached his chest. He looked down with difficulty at the hand that pierced his chest. He saw that in the palm of the hand, there was a scarlet Manjikyu Sharingan, staring at him coldly. At this time, Obsidian's voice came into his ears. From the beginning to the end, you are just a puppet at the mercy of others. Third update. Please recommend tickets, monthly tickets. Also, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 1366. Swish with a splash of blood, Obsidian pulled out the arm that penetrated Nagato's chest. Nagato staggered a step forward, then turned his head with difficulty, looked at Obsidian behind him who was staring at him coldly like a ghost, coughed up blood, and said to himself with difficulty, "It seems that, in the end, I still lost to fate." Obsidian's face was cold. "Lie down. Your mission has been completed." Thump! Before Obsidian's voice fell, Nagato fell to the ground unwillingly, and his vision began to gradually blur. After staying for a moment on the strange eyes in Nagato's eye sockets, Obsidian withdrew his gaze and did not rush to grab the eyes, but slowly floated into the air. Tsunade in the distance hesitated for a moment, and finally secretly sent a small slug to climb from the crack in the ground to Nagato, who fell in a pool of blood. And looking down at the battlefield, Obsidian's expression was extremely indifferent. The broken battlefield, the corpses all over the ground, and the thick and pungent smell of blood in the air could no longer touch his heartstrings. At this time, his heart was as hard as iron. And after the previous rounds of fierce battles, there were no ninjas on the battlefield who could resist him. All the Kage were swaying, and even if they regained consciousness under the treatment of Tsunade and the slug, they temporarily lost the ability to move. The situation of the Sannin is similar, and the experts of the 5 great ninja villages such as Deidara, Druid, Mei, Pakura, and other experts were either seriously injured by Obsidian's Kimitani Tensei or Obsidian's Shinra Tensei. Without exception, all of them lost the ability to fight. Several Homisubi of Amatsukumi's organization were even more seriously injured. For ordinary Manjikyu Uchiha, Susanoo will suffer a very serious pupil backlash when Susanoo is forcibly broken, and their Susanoo has been broken more than once since the previous fight with Uchiha. As the last hope of the ninja coalition, Naruto and Sasuke, one lost 9 tails and fell into a dying state, and the other was almost pierced through the sternum and fell from a high altitude. As for Uchiha, who had just assisted Naruto and Sasuke, half of his body was crushed by Obsidian's Kamitani Tensei, and Nagato's chest was directly pierced by Obsidian. Second-generation Naruto and fourth-generation Naruto were previously imprisoned by Obsidian's Black Stick. As one of the core sacrifices of the impure Earth body, it was more seriously damaged. Later, in order to create a chance for Guy, Naruto, and Sasuke to attack, they forcibly removed the Truth-Seeking Ball. The Truth-Seeking Ball melted a lot of their spiritual bodies, so the state of their impure Earth body was also very poor, and their combat power was almost reduced. Glancing at the defeated soldiers on the ground, Obsidian raised the corner of his mouth triumphantly. Finally, his eyes fell on Kakashi and said, "Kakashi, I still won." Kakashi supported his swaying body and looked up at Obsidian in the air. "What the hell do you want to do?" Obsidian glanced at the bright moon hanging above his head, and his tone was a little yearning and a little sad. "I want to create a world with Lin." "But Lin is already dead." Kakashi's expression dimmed. "That's right." After a pause, Obsidian said slowly, "That's why I want to create a world without killing, war, death, and hatred." Kakashi shook his head firmly. "That kind of world doesn't exist." Obsidian looked at Kakashi coldly. "You're still as useless as before, but it's okay. I'll do what you can't do with my own hands." Listening to the conversation between Kakashi and Obsidian, fourth-generation Naruto was slightly stunned. Then, he looked into the sky in surprise and muttered softly, "Obsidian." At that moment, Obsidian shifted his gaze to fourth-generation Naruto and said with a complicated tone, "Sensei, what? He's also a ninja of Mai? He's also a disciple of fourth-generation Naruto? Damn it, it's Mai's people again." When Obsidian called Sensei to fourth-generation Naruto, the surviving ninjas on the battlefield suddenly exploded. The former leader of Akatsuki, Nagato, was a disciple of Jiraiya, one of Mai's 3 ninjas. He stirred up trouble in the ninja world in the name of Akatsuki. After that, Madara Uchiha, who almost wiped out tens of thousands of ninjas with his own strength, had a closer relationship with Mai, because he was one of the founders of Mai with Hashirama Senju and Naruto. Now that the identity of Obsidian was revealed, everyone was shocked to find that the mysterious man who swept the ninja world and destroyed the whole ninja world was not only a ninja of Mai, but also a disciple of Naruto. Konoha couldn't get rid of this scapegoat, no matter what. Therefore, the ninjas of other villages all looked at the ninja of Mai indignantly. 3 generations Tsuchikage glared at Naruto of 3 generations. "Sarutobi, what else do you have to explain?" 4 generations of Kazekage also asked, "Did you already know his identity and have been hiding it from us?" 3 generations Naruto opened his mouth and instinctively wanted to explain a few words, but first Nagato, then Uchiha, and now Uchiha Obsidian's identity was revealed. As the longest-serving Naruto, it was really difficult for him to explain, so he could only sigh faintly. 4 generations Laying said, "It was Yumai who destroyed the ninja world." On the other side, Asma covered the wound with one hand and said, "Hey, it still came to this point." Mute weakly hung his head. Unlike Asma, Mute and other Jonin who were closer to the decision-making level, Fuyue, Richa, Kurenai, Gama, and Ibiki didn't know that the mysterious person of Akatsuki was Uchiha Obsidian. So when the identity of Obsidian was revealed, they were no less shocked than others. After all, during the shinobi school period, Obsidian was even worse than Hyojin and belonged to the bottom of the chain of contempt. In the Third Shinobi War, he died in the name of a hero, so no one thought that the mysterious person hiding behind the Akatsuki and planning the Nine Tails Rebellion, turn out to be Obsidian, the mysterious person who secretly controls the Akatsuki and defeated so many Kage and strong ninjas. Unexpectedly is Obsidian? Kurenai's face was full of disbelief. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't reconcile this invincible six-path immortal with the Obito who ranked at the bottom of the Ninja Academy's graduation exam. In an instant, a huge sense of absurdity filled her heart. Obsidian, who was floating in the air, crushed the remaining half of the mask on his face, revealing his appearance completely. First update, please recommend monthly votes. Chapter 1367. In the final valley. The towering statues standing on both sides of the waterfall had collapsed at this moment. In the messy pile of stones, two figures were facing each other across the middle of the waterfall. In the pile of stones, Uchimadara was breathing heavily. At this time, he was suppressed by Hashiroma's gate of the bright god. He could barely kneel on the ground. He couldn't even straighten his back. His impure earth body was constantly scattering debris. At the other end of the waterfall, the statue of the first Naruto, Hashirama, was penetrated by several black sticks and was firmly nailed to the ground. Just like Uchimadara, he couldn't move. At this time, Uchiha smiled and said, "You are still so difficult to deal with." The first Madara didn't have the mood to joke at this moment. He stared at Uchiha and said, "Madara, we are already dead. We shouldn't interfere in the affairs of the world anymore." The corner of Uchiha Madara's mouth rose. "Don't you want to change anything?" The first Madara was silent for a while and said, "Every generation has its own mission. We should trust the next generation. They will do better than us." Uchiha Madara shook his head. "No, there are some things that I don't do. No one will do it. I want to change the world. I want to make it what I want." The first Madara said helplessly, "You impose your own ideas on everyone. It will only distort the world." Uchiha Madara said solemnly, "Your idea of distributing tailed beasts to each village is foolish. That will not bring peace. Only my Eye of the Moon project can truly bring peace to the world of shinobi and let people enjoy peace forever." At this time, Uchiha Madara suddenly turned his head and looked at the direction of the battlefield of Mai in the distance. He said to himself, "Hey, the sound of the battle over there seems to have stopped." The first Madara also found something strange and looked at the direction of the battlefield of Mai. Since the beginning, the explosions and flames on Mai's battlefield had never stopped. There were a few times when the dazzling light even dispersed the curtain of night and shone on them. But at this moment, the battle seemed to have calmed down. Not only was there no sound, even the waves of chakra had begun to calm down. There's only one explanation for this situation. That is, the war over there has already had a result. As for what the result is, which side won, at present, the first generation and Uchiha Madara can't judge. Just as the two looked at the battlefield of Mai at the same time, Zetsu's figure slowly emerged from the ground and appeared beside Uchiha Madara. Although suppressed by the bright god gate, Madara Uchiha's momentum did not decrease, and he calmly asked, "How is the situation?" Zetsu bowed to Uchiha Madara and reported in a respectful tone, "The Obito has defeated the ninja coalition and swept the battlefield." "Hey, that kid is more capable than I thought." Uchiha Madara chuckled and immediately looked at the first generation provocatively. After hearing that the ninja coalition was defeated, the first generation looked gloomy and sighed. Uchiha Madara smiled and said, "Hashirama, it seems that the juniors you trust are not worthy of your trust. Your so-called will of fire is not worth a penny in the face of absolute power." The first generation didn't argue anything, but was silent. No matter how unwilling he was to admit it, the current situation is beyond his control. He has no way to argue, and he has no ability to change anything. Zetsu bowed to Uchiha Madara and asked, "My lord, what should we do next? Obsidian doesn't seem to want to resurrect you." Uchiha Madara sneered. "Well, does he think he can escape from my grasp?" Mai was on the battlefield, when Obsidian, who was floating in the air, crushed the remaining half of the mask on his face, and took off the hood. His whole face was finally revealed to everyone. Looking at the familiar and strange face, Kakashi was stunned. Obsidian's appearance didn't change much, but the two horns protruding from his forehead and the eye of the moon on his eyebrows made him feel a deep sense of alienation. It seems that these are the uncrossable gap between him and Obsidian. Others were also attracted by the two horns protruding from Obsidian's forehead and the scarlet eye of the moon on his eyebrows. Mute murmured, "How did he become like this?" Asma on the side shook his head. The Obsidian in front of him was so strange that he didn't dare to recognize him. At this time, Obsidian slowly opened his arms and floated higher while saying coldly, "The history of the shinobi world will be ended by me at this moment." After absorbing the 9 tails, Obsidian had accumulated enough ocular power. The eye of the moon on his eyebrows was ready to move at any time, and he could use the ultimate illusion recorded on the slate left by the six-path immortal at any time. In the distance, standing on the crown of a big tree, Cien coldly looked at Obsidian, who was floating in the sky with a bright moon behind him. There were a few times when he couldn't help but want to attack, but in the end, he restrained himself. With the power of his current body, he could indeed fight against the six-path immortal for a short time, and if he was caught off guard, he might even have the upper hand. But he knew very well that he couldn't kill Obsidian in a short time. Once the battle was dragged into a long battle, he had no chance of winning. "I didn't expect that there would be such a powerful individual among her descendants." Cien clenched his fists tightly, and a trace of unwillingness flashed in his eyes. But no matter how unwilling he was, he could only choose to avoid. In his opinion, if he wanted to defeat Obsidian, who had activated the Eye of the Moon, he must first obtain a perfect artifact. "This planet is going to wither." After shaking his head, Cien jumped down from the canopy. There was no longer any suspense when someone as strong as Obito appeared on this planet. No one could stop Obito, unless another Otsutsuki came to this planet. On the battlefield, at this time, Obsidian had floated to a very high place. He slowly looked at the moon above his head, then formed a seal with his hand, and then the eye of the moon between his eyebrows moved toward the bright moon. Looking at this scene, all the survivors felt their hearts skip a beat. Even the slowest person realized what Obsidian was going to do at this moment, and once Obsidian did it, the 5 great ninja villages and even the entire ninja world would be doomed. In an instant, a deep sense of despair enveloped everyone. At this time, Kurenai fell to the ground, looked at the sky with dull eyes, and murmured, "Who can save us?" Second update, please recommend votes, monthly votes. Chapter 1368. High up in the sky. The closer he got to the moon, the more restless the eye of the moon between Obsidian's eyebrows became. "It's time." Taking a deep breath, Obsidian first closed the eye of the moon, then suddenly opened it and projected the eye of the moon on the surface of the moon. In the blink of an eye, the bright moon in the bright night sky immediately became as red as blood. The moon turned red. How could this be? What did he do? The survivors on the battlefield all noticed the change in the moon. Looking at the blood-red moon in the night, everyone's hearts were in their throats. No one could explain why they felt so nervous. This feeling was more like an instinctive reaction to danger. Tsunade suddenly pointed at the moon and shouted, "Look!" In fact, there was no need for Tsunade to remind them. Everyone who had been staring at the moon had already noticed that after the moon turned red, there was a new change on the surface of the moon. There were circles of lines that looked like the eye of Rinnegan, and 9 symmetrically arranged Magatama appeared. "It's the red eye of Rinnegan." After a pause, Orochimaru said thoughtfully, "This pattern is exactly the same as the eye that grew out of Uchiha Obsidian's eyebrows." Because of his instinctive desire for the eye of the moon, Orochimaru had carefully observed the eye of the moon between Obsidian's eyebrows. Therefore, he immediately recognized the pattern on the surface of the moon. It was the pattern on Obsidian's eye of the moon. The injured Jiraiya panted and asked, "What does he want?" "I don't know." When in the Akatsuki, he always hid behind the scenes. I don't know much about him. After shaking his head, Orochimaru's expression was a little gloomy. I didn't expect this kid to be Uchiha from the same generation as Kuroto. Jiraiya's face was full of confusion. When the Watergate recruited him into their team, I even went to investigate him. He wasn't originally like this. What exactly happened? Why did he become so crazy? Is it really just for the sake of the girl named Noera? Tsunade said angrily. What a lunatic. Orochimaru sighed. We were all wrong. It turns out that Uchiha Obsidian is the most outstanding talent in that batch. At this moment, Orochimaru suddenly felt a little regretful. If it wasn't Red Bean, but this Uchiha Obsidian, maybe everything would be different. On the other side of the battlefield, Itachi, Jishuei, and Shinichi rushed to the side of Sasuke, who was seriously injured and unconscious. They checked Sasuke's body and found that Sasuke's sternum was completely shattered, and the internal organs were also shattered. It stands to reason that such a serious injury is impossible to survive. Under normal circumstances, Sasuke should be dead by now. But for some reason, Sasuke, who was so seriously injured, is still hanging on to his last breath. As the moon changed, their attention quickly moved to the moon. Shinichi said with hatred, Obsidian, that bastard has ruined our Uchiha clan. In the current situation, there is not much meaning to dwell on this, so Jishuei asked calmly, what do you think he's going to do? Itachi hesitated and said, it seems that he's going to use some kind of pupil technique. Shinichi curled his lips and said disdainfully, it should be the Eye of the Moon project that he has been talking about all this time. Itachi and Jishuei immediately thought of the stone slab in the secret room of the shrine. However, because they only have the Manjikyu Sharingan, they can only interpret the Eye of the Moon project vaguely mentioned on the stone slab. As for the specific implementation of the plan, they need the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan to continue to interpret it. At this moment, Obsidian, who was high in the sky, finally finished accumulating the last pupil technique and shouted, Infinite Tsukuyomi, open! With the activation of the Eye of the Moon, a strong light suddenly appeared on the scarlet surface of the moon. Bathed in the light that completely dispelled the night, Obsidian looked down at the entire shinobi world like a god and said indifferently, illuminate the world. In an instant, under the light of the moon, the night turned into day. The sky is bright. In an instant, this absurd thought emerged in everyone's mind. It was obviously night just now, but in the blink of an eye, the sky is bright. Itachi was startled for a moment and immediately exclaimed, oh no, don't look directly at the moon. Shinichi smiled and said, don't shout, it's too late. Jishuei gritted his teeth and once again activated Susanoo and used the artifact Yada no Kagami to protect the heads of several people, and said, I hope we can stop it. As soon as his voice fell, the Manjikyu Sharingan in Jishuei's eye sockets turned into the pattern of the Rinnegan, and then his Susanoo instantly collapsed, and his expression became dull. Almost at the same time, Itachi, Shinichi, the Kage in the distance, the Sannin, and all the survivors in the field, without exception, all the eyes in their eye sockets turned into the pattern of the Rinnegan, and they also became dull. Only the second-generation Naruto and the fourth-generation Naruto looked at each other. Not only the battlefield of Mai, but the entire country of fire and even the entire world of ninjas were illuminated by this light. In Mai, Cloud, Rock, Mist, Sand Crypsis, Sound Village, Grass Village, Takamura Village, and other ninja villages, all the ninjas became dull, and the eyes in their eye sockets turned into the pattern of the Rinnegan. Even the birds, beasts, and fish in the mountains and lakes fell into a dull state, and their eyes turned into the pattern of the Rinnegan. In the final valley, looking at the sky as bright as day, Uchiha Madara smiled and said, so soon. The first generation looked at Uchiha Madara and said, this is the Eye of the Moon you mentioned? Yes. Uchiha Madara nodded. The first generation shouted, do you want to turn everyone into puppets that can't think? Uchiha Madara said coldly, isn't this the only way to keep the world peaceful? The first generation was angry. In the sky, Looking at everyone on the ground falling into the infinite Tsukuyami, Obsidian smirked and said, "I finally succeeded." At this moment, he felt that he was the only god in the world, the master of life and death. Swish, however, at this moment, a colorful rainbow suddenly appeared in the distant sky. This colorful rainbow instantly dispelled the strong light reflected on the surface of the moon and continued to move forward, crossing the sky of the entire shinobi world, and then into the deeper universe. All the creatures who fell into the infinite Tsukuyami were instantly awakened by this colorful rainbow. In the sky, Obsidian Madara suddenly looked in the direction of the rainbow and said in surprise, "What happened there?" Third update. Please recommend votes, monthly votes. Also, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 1369. Obsidian's shock is not without reason. With his current strength of Six-Path Realm, he instantly sensed that the rainbow crossing the shinobi world is not a natural phenomenon, but a man-made one, and the chakra fluctuation contained in the rainbow is extremely terrifying. This level of chakra fluctuation is something that even he is slightly inferior to. How is this possible? Obsidian had a look of disbelief on his face. In his opinion, no one in the current shinobi world should be able to do this. Even the sage of Amatsukami, Yama, is no exception. But at this moment, the scarlet Tsukuyami between his eyebrows seemed to have sensed something and suddenly turned in the direction of the rainbow. Obviously, Obsidian was not the only one who was surprised. On the battlefield, the people who were awakened from the infinite Tsukuyami were also confused at this time. Just now, under the infinite Tsukuyami Obsidian, with the exception of 2nd generation Naruto and 4th generation Naruto, everyone, including Jishuei and the others who have the Manjikyu Sharingan and use the artifact Yada Yagami, fell into the super Jinjutsu cast by Obsidian's Tsukuyami without any resistance. But in the blink of an eye, the rainbow crossed the sky, blocking the infinite Tsukuyami reflected on the surface of the moon, waking everyone up one by one. In just a few short breaths, everyone had experienced the entire process of falling into the illusion, being awakened by the strange phenomenon in the sky, and then getting rid of the illusion. Therefore, even the powerful and experienced Obscurus couldn't help but feel a little absent-minded. After a while, 3 generations Naruto shook his head and asked, "What happened?" 3 generations Tsukuyami also held his head and asked, "What happened? Did we just fall into a Jinjutsu?" 4th generation Liang, who has a better physique and is younger, has already gotten rid of the dizziness and looked up at the rainbow in the night sky and said, "It was the rainbow that interfered with the Jinjutsu and rescued us." 4th generation Kazekage was confused. Where did this rainbow come from? On the other side, Orochimaru, who was awakened, immediately looked at the rainbow in the night sky in a daze. Jiraiya, who was also awakened from the Jinjutsu, asked, "What is that?" Tsunade sighed. "What a strong chakra fluctuation." Orochimaru narrowed his eyes slightly and nodded. "This rainbow shouldn't be a natural coincidence. It should be artificially created." Tsunade asked, "Who could it be?" Almost at the same time, 2nd generation Naruto, who has the impure earth body and witnessed the whole process of Obsidian's infinite Tsukuyami, also asked this question thoughtfully. "Who could it be?" 4th generation Naruto looked at the unconscious Naruto on the ground and said, "I think I know who it is." On the periphery of the battlefield, Cien looked up at the 7-colored rainbow in the night sky that stretched across the ninja world and went all the way to the depths of the universe, and was speechless for a long time, in the Valley of Termination. After the reflection of the infinite Tsukuyami was dispelled by the rainbow in the ninja world, Uchiha Madara was shocked. What's going on? 1st generation was also stunned. He was desperate just now because the horror of the infinite Tsukuyami was completely beyond his expectations. He racked his brains, but he couldn't think of any way to break it. But he never thought that there would be a rainbow in the sky, and instantly dispelled the infinite Tsukuyami. Standing next to Uchiha Madara, Zetsu was also shocked at the moment. After thinking for a while, Kuroto said to Madara with some uncertainty, "I'm afraid that the only person who can do this in the shinobi world is the sage of Amatsukami." The sage of Amatsukami? Uchiha Madara's eyes suddenly became cold. In a hidden underground palace in the Land of Fire, Yui woke up from the illusion and immediately looked at the three members of the Shadow Guard, Red Bean, Gale, and Kian, who were responsible for protecting her, and asked, "What happened just now?" Red Bean held her forehead and said, "We seem to be in an illusion. How is this possible? We are hiding underground." After a pause, Kian was shocked and said, "Did someone invade here?" Gale checked the enchantments everywhere and shook his head. "There is no sign of invasion." Yui asked worriedly, "You still can't contact Kian?" Red Bean quickly turned her face to the side and pretended to check the enchantments around while comforting Yui. "Don't worry. He will be fine. He is Naruto." In fact, as the current captain of the Shadow Guard, Red Bean had already received the news of Hyojin's death from the General Command, but she couldn't bear to tell Yui about it. After listening to Red Bean's comfort, Yui reluctantly nodded and secretly prayed, "Kuroto, where are you now? Please be safe." In a land of snow, rainbow ice wall, Hyojin looked at the rainbow that intersected with his chakra and then projected all the way to the sky. His face was full of surprise. Although he had guessed that his attack on the Kekii network would inevitably cause an illusion and couldn't be completely concealed, he didn't expect that it would be so exaggerated. Isn't this the same as announcing it to the entire shinobi world? He, who has always been low-key and pragmatic, was not used to this kind of situation and instinctively wanted to cover it up. But soon he shook his head with a chuckle and gradually retracted his gaze. From this moment onwards, he was no longer an ordinary human who was restricted by his body and spirit body and was troubled by his lifespan. After passing the final fourth stage of the Kekii fusion ritual, Kuroto has successfully stepped into the threshold of Kekii Net. After Otsutsuki Kagaya, he is the second true Kekii Net in the shinobi world. In essence, he is even stronger than the Sage of Six Paths, who had entered this realm for a short time. So even if he has just advanced, even if the chakra in his body has not recovered, even if he has not completely mastered the ability of Kekii Network, he is still not afraid of anyone in the shinobi world. Therefore, from this moment on, the gorgeous rainbow across the shinobi world is no longer an illusion that reveals his strength and position, but a beautiful scenery for him to enjoy. He doesn't need to hide anymore, and he doesn't need to worry about anything. Because the offensive and defensive situation has changed, he doesn't need to worry anymore. Thump thump. Right at this moment, accompanied by the sound of heartbeat, the fine slit between his brows suddenly opened, and it revealed the eye of Samsura with 9 Magatama within it. Hyojin moved his gaze up, and suddenly, in the vision of his pair of Tenseigan, he finally saw the scarlet eye of the moon between his eyebrows. The first update is here, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. Chapter 1370. Crack. Just as Hyojin was about to carefully observe the scarlet eye of the moon that had opened between his eyebrows, a crisp cracking sound suddenly came from under his feet. Hyojin quickly looked down, and his expression immediately changed. He saw that on the altar formed by the grayer mineral vein under his feet, a spider web-like crack suddenly appeared, and it rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it covered the entire altar. Then, the originally bright green grayer mineral vein quickly dimmed, as if it had exhausted its chakra, completely losing its previous luster. Slowly squatting down, Kuroto reached out and picked up a piece of stone of grayer that was broken on the altar, but he didn't expect that as soon as he exerted a little force in his hand, the dull stone of grayer shattered into fine dust and drifted away with the wind. Hyojin suddenly frowned. However, at this moment, the entire grayer mineral vein under his feet that was used as the altar collapsed. Crash! Countless gravel fell from the sky fortress. However, before they could land on the ground, The cold wind blew, and the stones of Grayer disintegrated in an instant. It was as if they had completely decayed, and when the wind blew, they turned into flying debris that drifted with the wind. As the altar, the Grayer mineral vein was the core of the rebuilt Sky Fortress. With its unexpected collapse, the balance of the entire Sky Fortress was instantly destroyed, and the Sky Fortress also toppled and fell to the ground. Floating in the air, Hyojin was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He immediately reached out and grasped at the falling Sky Fortress. In an instant, a huge suction force suddenly formed, stopping the falling momentum of the Sky Fortress. Then, the giant Tenseigan in the Sky Fortress was activated, and the Sky Fortress was rebalanced. Phew! Exhaling, Hyojin wondered what happened. Why did the Grayer mineral vein suddenly shatter? Rumble! Before he could figure out the reason for the collapse of the Grayer mineral vein, the Heaven Spear Tower directly below him collapsed with a loud rumble. Along with the collapse of the Sky Spear Tower, the 6 huge ice mirrors surrounding it shattered and collapsed one after another. Hyojin's eyes narrowed as he activated the Tenseigan. Under his careful observation, he was shocked to discover that whether it was the Heaven Spear Tower or the 6 ice mirrors around it, they were all covered in cracks that were hard to be seen by the naked eye. The broken parts seemed to have completely decayed, as if they had been washed by time for thousands of years. Hyojin hurriedly looked around and discovered that the originally lush green and fairyland-like rainbow ice wall had already lost all signs of life. The lake had dried up, the green grass had withered, and even the originally fertile soil had lost its vitality. The surroundings were deathly silent. At this time, Hyojin's gaze fell on the magic circle of the chakra transportation area in the distance. He found that Alo and Ningxi, who were in the magic circle, had already fainted, and their breaths were extremely weak. If it weren't for the fact that one of them was the Tail's Jinchuriki and the other was the Dragon Veins Jinchuriki, they would have been sucked dry of their vitality and turned into 2 dried corpses. This was not because Hyojin had used the magic circle to extract their chakra. In fact, after the ritual entered the 4th stage, Hyojin had already stopped extracting their chakra, because the amount of chakra needed for the 4th stage was astronomical, and the chakra of the tail and the dragon vein was already difficult to support. Only a huge amount of natural energy was enough for Hyojin to maintain the ritual. But even so, in the process of the birth of the bloodline net, all the lives around it had become the target of plunder. Even if Hyojin himself did not have this intention, he could not change this reality. After understanding this, Hyojin's expression became complicated. Then he looked into the distance, at the snowfield outside the enchantment, and found that the snow on the snowfield had all melted, revealing the desolate and withered ground. This was a kind of complete silence, and even with Hyojin's current eyesight, he could not see the end of it. It was as if the entire snowfield had become a lifeless desert in Hyojin's ritual. Is this the bloodline net? Looking at the scene in front of him, Hyojin suddenly had a deeper understanding of the bloodline net. The birth of a bloodline net signified the death of countless lives. This was the most direct and cruel plundering of energy and life force. The reason why the Otsutsuki clan kept traveling in the universe was to plunder the energy of the veins of the planets. And the natural energy in the veins of each planet was limited. Once the natural energy in the veins was sucked dry, the whole planet would wither and become a desolate dead planet. The Shinobi world is undoubtedly a relatively special planet in the universe. The energy of the veins here is large enough, so the Otsutsuki clan set their eyes on this place thousands of years ago and sent Kaguya to plant the divine tree. It can be said that without the rebellion of the Sage of 6 Paths brothers, under the continuous absorption of the divine tree, even a planet like the Shinobi world with a large amount of energy would not be able to escape the fate of withering. And the rebellion of the Sage of 6 Paths brothers against his mother Kaguya and the division of the divine tree not only stopped the process of withering, but also gave the Shinobi world a chance to recover for a short period of time. However, Hyojin's promotion of Bloodline Net has obviously broken some of the balance. At this moment, he can clearly feel that the veins of the shinobi world have been affected by his ritual. The withering with the rainbow ice wall, as the center is spreading to the surroundings. As for how far this deathly still withering will spread, even Hyojin can't estimate it now. However, there's one thing that Suijin is very sure of, and that is that the number of Kekii Genkai that each planet can support is limited. Although the shinobi world has been nurtured for thousands of years after the birth of Kagaya Kikiage, but judging from Suijin's ceremony this time, if there is another similar ceremony, the shinobi world will probably wither completely. Of course, Hyojin doesn't know that there is another 10 tails in the shinobi world, which is the existence of another divine tree. In fact, as early as thousands of years ago, after the Otsutsuki clan discovered the shinobi world, they have already determined that the shinobi world is enough to support 2 bloodline nets at once. Withdrawing his gaze from the distance, Hyojin looked up at the gorgeous and dreamy rainbow in the night sky, and then looked at the desolate and deathly silent ground. This strong contrast made him sigh slightly, and he said with emotion, "No bloodline net is innocent." Here's the second update, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Also, thank you to the students who gave me gifts today. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 1371. As the state of Hyojin's Kekii net gradually stabilized, the 7-colored rainbow that resonated with his chakra that traversed the ninja world and extended into the universe gradually dissipated. Hyojin also adjusted his state of mind at this time and put away his emotions. In short, he was lucky enough to become a Kekii net this time because he benefited from the gift of the ninja world. So in the future, he will do his best to protect the peace of the ninja world. As for the various entanglements of killing and plundering, he has long left them behind. He has always been a selfish and pragmatic person. If he could do it all over again, he would still hold this ritual without hesitation and attack the Kekii net, because nothing can stop him from exploring immortality and the unknown. After calming down his mood, Hyojin's figure swayed. Swish, in just an instant, he appeared hundreds of meters away from the place where Xianglin used the time and space ninjutsu to move Otsutsuki samurai. The whole body flicker technique left no traces, almost as fast as the flying thunder god technique teleportation. Then, he activated the scarlet eye of the moon between his eyebrows and carefully scanned the surroundings. The corner of his mouth slightly raised, and the eye of the moon flashed with a strange brilliance. Then, pieces of black squares that looked like pixels appeared in front of him. These pixel-like black squares continued to fold and expand, and in a moment, a strange space door was forcibly opened on the solid space barrier. Next to the river Styx, rumble with a continuous roar, the storm caused by Otsutsuki Samurai's pupil technique, silver wheel reincarnation explosion, continued to wreak havoc beside the river Styx. Everything in the surroundings, including the water in the river Styx and the dead souls floating in the river Styx, were unable to escape. They were swept into the storm and sent flying. Crack! Suddenly, a crisp sound came from the enormous spirit formation in front of Ziyuan and Xianglin as it was struck by the storm. Ziyuan hurriedly raised her head to take a look, and her face instantly turned pale because there was an extremely conspicuous crack on the barrier. As the Miko of the Land of Demons, this defensive barrier was the strongest barrier she could cast. But even so, it still couldn't block Otsutsuki Samurai's pupil technique, silver wheel reincarnation explosion. Seeing that the cracks on the enchantment were getting bigger and bigger, Ziyuan quickly shouted, "I can't hold it anymore. Quickly think of a way." Xianglin panted heavily. "Just hold on for a little longer. I still haven't accumulated enough power of my eyes." Ziyuan shouted, "I've been holding on. Otherwise, we would have died long ago. It's not like you don't know how powerful that guy is. Even my sealing technique that can seal 9 tails can't trap him. If you don't send us back, we'll die here together." Xianglin replied helplessly, I try my best." It was already Xiang Lin's limit to not die after casting the Reincarnation Heaven technique. Then, in order to deal with Otsutsuki Samurai, she forcibly launched the time and space ninjutsu that she had just comprehended, so now she was completely powerless. Quickly, Ziyuan wanted to urge her again, but before she could finish her words, her barrier was completely broken. Panicked, she couldn't care much, quickly shut up, and cast a few more barriers that could be launched instantly without the need for hand seals. Boom, boom, boom. However, these hastily launched enchantments couldn't even delay the Otsutsuki Tonari's silver wheel reincarnation explosion, let alone stop it. Almost at the moment of launching, they were destroyed by the storm one by one. In an instant, the huge storm rushed straight to the panicked Ziyuan and Xiang Lin. At this moment, Xiang Lin's accumulated pupil power was not enough to launch the time and space ninjutsu again. Seeing that the storm was close in front of her, she had to raise her hands and use the remaining pupil power to launch Shinra Tensei. However, the repulsive force of Shinra Tensei couldn't resist the silver wheel reincarnation explosion driven by the truth-seeking ball. The invisible repulsive force only lasted for 2 or 3 seconds before it was destroyed by the storm. It's over. The same thought flashed in the minds of Xiang Lin and Ziyuan at the same time. Just as the two of them fell into despair, a black space door suddenly appeared behind them. Then 2 arms stretched out from the space door, instantly grabbed the back of their collars, and pulled them into the space door. The whole process happened in an instant. When the storm hit, not to mention Xiang Lin and Ziyuan, even the black space door had disappeared without a trace. In the distance, looking at Xiang Lin and Ziyuan who disappeared into thin air in the distance, Otsutsuki Samurai's face was extremely gloomy. With the insight of his Tenseigan, he naturally captured the moment when Xiang Lin and Ziyuan were rescued. It was also because of this that he felt extremely depressed. Time and space ninjutsu again. After talking to himself, Otsutsuki Samurai's gloomy eyes became more dignified. Although it was only for a short moment, he still vaguely sensed the chakra fluctuation of the person who rescued Xiang Lin and Ziyuan. It was so strong that it made his heart palpitate. What made him even more uneasy was that the chakra fluctuation contained a very pure Tenseigan chakra. Snow Country. Looking at the desolate scene in front of her, Zin, who was rescued, was still a little confused. She didn't recognize that this was the Snow Country. She subconsciously asked Xiang Lin, who was beside her, "Where did you send us to?" Xiang Lin also looked dull. "It wasn't me." Hyojin, who was behind the two of them, pressed his hands on their backs at this time, and said while transferring some chakra to them, "Don't worry, you are safe now, Sama." The two of them looked back at the same time and looked at Hyojin in surprise. "Did you save us?" "Yes." Hyojin gently nodded. The time and space ninjutsu he just used is called Yomibaira Ban. It is the time and space ninjutsu that he comprehended after advancing to Kekiai Net and obtaining the Eye of the Moon in his eyebrows. Yomibaira Ban is a time and space ninjutsu at the level of Kekiai Net. It allows the user to open a space door at will and travel through various spaces at will without the need for hand seals. It can be used for movement, evasion, surprise attacks, and so on. It is a very versatile, elusive, and unpredictable time and space ninjutsu that is impossible to guard against. It was through the Eye of the Moon in his eyebrows that Hyojin saw the traces of Xiang Lin's Sanjitsu Gorge, and then he followed the traces to find Styx and rescued Xiang Lin and Ziyuan. At this time, Xiang Lin and Ziyuan finally found that they have returned to the shinobi world, but looking at the rainbow ice wall and the endless desolation around them, the two of them were taken aback and asked in unison, "Sama, what happened here?" After Xiang Lin and Ziyuan recovered a little, Hyojin said, "Let's talk about this later. You two deal with this place first. Remove all traces of the ritual. Then take the unconscious AI and Ningxi and drive the air fortress away from here." The reason why Hyojin rescued Xiang Lin and Ziyuan first, in addition to saving their lives, is that he needs their help to deal with the aftermath. As for Otsutsuki Samurai, Hyojin doesn't have the time to deal with him for the time being, and there is no need to rush to deal with him, because as the possessor of the Tenseigan, he knows better than anyone how embarrassing Otsutsuki Samurai is right now. Yes. After listening to Hyojin's instructions, Xianglin and Ziyuan responded in unison. Then, Ziyuan looked around curiously and asked, "Where is Suijin?" Hyojin waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about him for the time being." Because Haku can control nature energy, when Hyojin tried to break the Kekii net, he immediately noticed that something was wrong and immediately escaped from the rainbow ice wall with Konoha and evacuated some of the residents of the snow country who were close to the rainbow ice wall. Xianglin asked, "Sama, what about you?" Hyojin looked in the direction of my village and said lightly, "It's time to end this shinobi war." On the battlefield outside my village, when the brilliant rainbow above their heads gradually dissipated, the bright night sky once again enveloped the world as if everything that happened just now was just an illusion. Floating high in the sky, Obsidian's eyes gradually narrowed. The scarlet Tsukiyomi between his eyebrows stared at the distance, staring at the direction where the rainbow came from, as if waiting for something. At this moment, the survivors on the battlefield also began to gradually understand that Obsidian, who swept the entire shinobi world in the sky, was waiting for the arrival of the existence that created the rainbow. Who created the seven-colored rainbow just now? Will he come? This is the ultimate battle that will determine the survival of the shinobi world. Who will win? One by one, these questions poured into the hearts of the survivors on the battlefield. However, there was no noise, no discussion. Everyone was like Obsidian in the sky, looking at the direction where the rainbow came from and waiting silently. As a result, the entire battlefield fell into a strange and indescribable silence. At this moment, the Tsukiyomi between Obsidian's eyebrows suddenly moved and focused on a spot in the sky. Almost at the same time, Nagato, who woke up after being healed by Tsunade's slug, also looked at the spot in the sky with his strange eyes. And just as the two of them focused on that spot, a black pixel cube suddenly appeared in the air and quickly folded and expanded, opening a space door that seemed to lead to the netherworld. Then, a figure wearing a black cloak with golden edges of Amitsukami and a demon-pattern mask walked out of the space door and floated in the sky, just like Obsidian. Obsidian's eyes turned cold. "Yama, you are finally here." Seeing the appearance of Yama, the survivors felt that they had expected it. Because the person who created the rainbow was Yama, it was the most logical. After all, in everyone's opinion, only immortals could rival immortals. Hyojin glanced at the battlefield, then moved his eyes to Obsidian. "You don't wear a mask this time?" Obsidian tore off the robe on his body, revealing the Uchiha clan emblem inside. With an indifferent face, "I don't need to disguise anymore. I am Uchiha Obsidian. Yama, let me see your true face." Hyojin slowly reached out to the mask on his face. In an instant, whether it was Obsidian in the sky or the survivors on the ground, all of them stared at the face of Yama, wanting to see what the immortal who founded Amitsukami and had been secretly maintaining peace in the ninja world looked like. Swish, Hyojin took off the mask and tore off the cloak, revealing Naruto's Haori robe, which was fluttering in the wind. Looking at Hyojin's face under the mask and the eye-catching Haori robe of Naruto, Obsidian was stunned, as if he was struck by lightning. F***CK. Hyojin. Not only Obsidian, but everyone on the battlefield was shocked by this scene. Kakashi said in shock, "Yamato's Yama is Kuroto." Recalling the past transactions between Amitsukami and the village, Mute was shocked. How is this possible? How can Kuroto be the leader of Amitsukami? He has even represented the village in transactions with Amitsukami. Asma said with some uncertainty, "Are we still in the illusion?" On the other side, Jiraiya suddenly looked at Orochimaru and asked, "What's going on?" Orochimaru looked dull and murmured, "This kid." Tsunade looked incredulous. "The leader of Akatsuki is Uchiha Obsidian? The leader of Amitsukami is Hyojin?" What's going on in the ninja world? At this time, she couldn't help but recall the pitiful Hyojin and Uchiha Obsidian who stood at the end of the long line when she was selecting disciples in the ninja school. At that time, Hyojin and Uchiha Obsidian were second from the bottom and first from the bottom of the ninja school. They were a pair of brothers in hardship. So, she didn't even look at them and directly chose Kato Duan's niece, Mute, as her disciple. She didn't expect that these two who were second from the bottom and first from the bottom of the ninja school would not only grow into existences that even she, as a Sannin of Mai, had to look up to, but also become the key to the fate of the ninja world. At this moment, she didn't know whether she had gone crazy or the world had gone crazy. Not far away, Richa and some of the surviving Hyuga family members were also stunned. They had guessed that the leader of Amatsukami, Yama, was a ninja with Byakugan Kekiai, but they subconsciously put Yama, who was a sage, into the Otsutsuki family. They never thought that Yama was actually a member of their own family. Hyuga Takashi looked at Richa in surprise and asked, "Is this true?" Richa was completely stunned and couldn't answer this question. He had received too many shocks today, so much that he didn't know how to think. Fuyue let out a long sigh of relief and said, "I was right." After realizing that all the Manjikyu in the family except for himself, including his own son Itachi, had betrayed him and joined Amatsukami, becoming the confidant of the fifth Hokage, Kuroto guessed that the seemingly ordinary fifth Hokage Kuroto is probably the Yama who is secretly manipulating Amatsukami from the shadows. On the other side, 3 generations Tsuchikage looked at 3 generations Naruto in disbelief and asked with a trembling voice, "Amatsukami." Amatsukami was also secretly established by Yumai. 3 generations Naruto pointed at Hyojin, who was wearing Naruto's Haori in the sky, and wanted to explain, but when he opened his mouth, he didn't know how to explain. The fact that the leader of Amatsukami was 5th Naruto, not to mention the other Kages, even he, who had been in control of Mai, was at a loss and didn't know what to do. 4 generations Lei-ing looked at 3 generations Naruto in a daze and said, "Yumai established Akatsuki and Amatsukami, playing us in circles. What are you trying to do?" 3 generations Naruto's face scrunched up. In the face of an ally who had fought a bloody battle with him, he really wanted to explain and eliminate the misunderstanding between them. But the Hokage Hakusho on Kuroto in the air was too dazzling, making him feel that his explanation was meaningless. 4 generations of Kazekage laughed bitterly and said, "Oh, after fighting for so long, all of you are Mai's people. Since that's the case, you can just have a fight with the door closed. Why did you drag us in?" This 3 generations Naruto wanted to open his mouth several times, but closed it several times. Tsuchikage, Lei-ing, and Kazekage saw this and asked in unison, "What are you trying to say?" 3 generations Naruto looked bitter and helpless. "I really don't know anything." At this time, Deidale climbed up from the ground and cursed at Kakashi. "You despicable my ninjas, you obviously secretly formed Amatsukami, but you still ask me every day whether I am a member of Amatsukami or not. Don't you know in your heart whether I am a member of Amatsukami or not?" Kakashi quickly explained, "It's a misunderstanding. This is a misunderstanding. Cloud Village's Druid, Sand Crypsis's Pakura, Mist Village's May, and the others all looked at Kakashi with different expressions. Because not long ago, at the end of the Chunin exam, Kakashi also proposed to form a fake Amatsukami to deal with Akatsuki. Now that they thought about it, they all felt that Kakashi, the Hokage agent, had too many tricks up his sleeves. They didn't dare to think about it too deeply. Just thinking about it made them shudder. Asma, Red, and Mute also looked at Kakashi and asked, "Kakashi already knew?" How would I know?" Kakashi was speechless. Mute said, "Then why did you propose to form a fake Amatsukami?" Red also echoed, "Yes, under normal circumstances, it is impossible to make such a proposal. If you didn't know that the leader of Amatsukami is Kage, how can you be sure that Amatsukami would allow us to form a fake Amatsukami? Just think about it. It is impossible." Asma said angrily, "Kakashi, you even hid it from me." Kakashi waved his hand repeatedly. It's a misunderstanding. It's really a misunderstanding. In the distance, Nagato slowly stood up and stared at Hyojin in the air while exclaiming in his heart, Yama turned out to be Mai's fifth-generation Naruto. Before this, Kuroto had never put this Hyuga Hokage in his eyes. He even felt that Mai's fifth-generation Naruto was just a puppet that Mai temporarily pushed out to balance the conflict between Naruto and Uchiha clan. So when Obsidian proposed to him to recruit fifth-generation Naruto as the spy that Amatsukami left in Mai, he didn't care too much and agreed. He never thought that the most inconspicuous Naruto in Mai would be his strongest enemy, and he never thought that the spy that Obsidian chose was the real leader of Amatsukami. We were all fooled. In the face of this reality, Nagato was speechless. On the periphery of the battlefield, staring at Hyojin in the air in the distance, Cien's expression became more and more solemn, and he whispered, How is this possible? The Obsidian who became the Jubi's Jinchuriki and stepped into the six-path realm in one fell swoop has completely exceeded his expectations, because in his opinion, with Otsutsuki Kagaya's bloodline gradually thinning, there shouldn't be a new six-path powerhouse in the shinobi world, because it doesn't conform to the laws of nature. The appearance of the six-path Obsidian can be said to be a coincidence, but can also be said to be the final convergence of the essence of the shinobi world. After all, although the Jubi of Otsutsuki Kagaya was broken up, whether it was the Outer Path Golem or the Nine-Tailed Beast, they still remained in the shinobi world, and there is still a possibility for them to reunite. But with the appearance of Hyojin later, he couldn't explain it at all. And with his perception, he can easily judge the strength of Hyojin's chakra, even higher than Obsidian, who became the Jubi's Jinchuriki, and almost close to Otsutsuki Kagaya, who swallowed the chakra fruit. Therefore, he was very puzzled. He didn't understand how Hyojin did it. Even for a pure Otsutsuki clan member, breaking through the Kekii net is a very difficult thing. What the hell is going on in the shinobi world? Cien rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache. High in the sky. After the initial shock, Obsidian immediately recalled the time when he sneaked into Mai to threaten Hyojin, using the removal of the caged bird curse as bait to lure Hyojin to become his spy and investigate the Amatsukami for him. Suddenly, his face turned red. Hyojin, you bastard, it turns out that you have been watching me make a fool of myself all this time. Hyojin shrugged. I have to say you are indeed very talented when it comes to choosing spies. When you came to me and asked me to investigate myself, I was also very embarrassed. Obsidian shouted, Enough! Hyojin said lightly, Fate is really interesting. When did you notice me? After a pause, Obsidian suddenly woke up. That time, it was you who met me in the root base. Obsidian recalled that when Shinichi defected and caused havoc in a root base, he encountered the mysterious man in the root base's secret vault. At that time, the two of them tested each other and found that they couldn't do anything to each other, so they searched separately and worked together to empty the Danzo's secret vault. That was also the first time that Obsidian had any impression of encountering the mysterious man who was suspected to be Amatsukami's Yama. Hearing Obsidian mention it, Hyojin also recalled. Oh, you mean that time? Obsidian was surprised and suspicious. You already have the Tenseigan at that time, but you were only a teenager at that time, right? You're the last one. How could you? Halfway through his words, Obsidian suddenly stopped, suddenly felt a toothache because in the ninja school's graduation exam, Hyojin ranked above him. You're the last one. Didn't you awaken the Manjikyu Sharingan at the age of 10? After curling his lips, Hyojin smiled with emotion and said, Do you remember what I said to you? Thanks to you being the last one in the exam, I didn't rank at the bottom. Obsidian was ashamed. He felt like he was being publicly executed. On the battlefield, the surviving ninjas also looked at each other. No one would have thought that one of them secretly established the Akatsuki and the other secretly established the Amatsukami, manipulating the entire shinobi world behind the scenes and playing with the entire shinobi world in the palm of their hands, would turn out to be the last and second from the last in Konoha Shinobi School. Three generations. Tsuchikage looked at Naruto of three generations with contempt. You don't know how to cultivate such peerless geniuses. Your mind ninja school is really wasteful. Four generations, Liang said. If such geniuses were in our cloud village, they would definitely receive the best training. They would never become the last one in their class. Four generations of Kazekage said with emotion. It's really surprising. Although he was also very disgusted with Mai for playing with him and the Sankrypsis, but with the exposure that Naruto of three generations was the leader of Amatsukami, he immediately restrained his emotions and no longer openly questioned Naruto of Kazekage. At three generations, Naruto was speechless. Kuroda wanted to say that Uchiha Bido and Suijin were really noobs when they were in shinobi school. It's not that he has no vision, but looking at the two sages hovering in the sky at this moment, he couldn't say it. On the other side, my Sannin all had a strange look on their faces. When they were selecting disciples in the shinobi school, they were not optimistic about Obsidian and Hyojin, who were the last two, but it was these two who stirred up such a big mess in the shinobi world. The terrifying Akatsuki and the mysterious Amatsukami were actually the handiwork of these two fellows. Now, they have all become sages that can sweep away all the shinobi villages with their own strength and suppress the entire shinobi world. This is really inconceivable to them. Kakashi looked at Hyojin and Obsidian in the sky and said to himself, "They all say that I am a genius, but they really wronged me." Cloud Village's druid glanced at Kakashi, Kurenai, Asuma, and Mute and asked, "I am suddenly a little curious. Who is the third from the bottom in your year?" Asuma pointed at a guy who had just opened 8 inner hidden gates formation, bent the staff transformed by the truth-seeking ball, and forced Obsidian to dodge. "Hey, that's him." At this time, Dead Ale said, "Hey, are the last in your village so strong?" In the sky, Obsidian said coldly, "Since you mentioned the graduation exam, then you should know that the reason why I am ranked below you is because I was late." Hyojin raised the corner of his mouth and said jokingly, "What? Do you want to challenge my ranking?" Obsidian twisted his neck. "Today, let us finish the competition that couldn't be carried out that year." Hyojin said, "Okay, I accept your challenge." In an instant, the eye of the moon between their eyebrows fiercely stared at each other. The chapter of 7,000 words is almost 3.5 chapters of the usual. It will be Monday soon. The ranking list will be updated. Please recommend votes, monthly votes. Also, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 1372. The chapter of Naruto's world in the eyes of reincarnation has been released. Please wait for a while. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1373. In the confrontation, the eye of the moon between Hyojin and Obsidian's eyebrows gradually swelled, and the color of the Magatama on their scarlet eyes became darker, each emitting a demonic light, as if they had met a strong enemy. Swoosh! Just at the moment when chakra began to entangle with each other, the two people in the air did not waste any more words and fiercely pounced on each other with a sharp, ear-piercing whistle. At this moment, the speed of both of them had exceeded the limit of a ninja, and just the impact of a few hundred meters brought about a series of roars of sonic booms. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the two of them collided, causing a loud noise. In a trance, the survivors on the battlefield vaguely saw the moment the two collided. The bright night sky appeared slightly distorted, as if the space barrier had been shattered. Then, the torrent produced by the collision of the two poured down from the sky, forming a storm that swept through the entire battlefield. The battlefield, which was already in a mess, became even more chaotic after being attacked by the storm. Moreover, the area affected by the storm was even larger and wider than the previous battles. Even the distant Mai village was affected, and a long section of the village's outer wall collapsed under the impact of the storm. Is this the power of immortals? Damn it, I can't even open my eyes. Hey, shouldn't we evacuate first? It doesn't feel safe here. The survivors who were struggling in the storm were all panicking. The two immortals in the air only had an ordinary impact, but the aftermath caused such a storm. They could not imagine what kind of disaster would be caused if the two of them continued to fight. Therefore, a thought flashed in everyone's mind at the same time, and that was to escape. On the side of the Ninja Coalition army, all the ninjas who could still move carried the wounded who were still breathing and quickly retreated in the direction of the My Village. Among them, Tsunade carried the seriously injured Jiraiya, Kakashi carried Guy, who was barely breathing, 4 generations Naruto carried Naruto, who was also on the verge of death, and Itachi carried the unconscious Sasuke. Under the threat of death, everyone burst out with a strong will to survive. In the chaos, Jiraiya, who was supported by Tsunade, suddenly realized that Orochimaru did not follow. He quickly turned around and shouted at Orochimaru, who was still standing in the same place. "What are you still doing?" Tsunade also urged Orochimaru. "Orochimaru, their battle is not something we can intervene in. Quickly escape." Orochimaru shook his head and said in his unique hoarse voice, "You don't have to worry about me." Jiraiya thought that Orochimaru did not want to return to the My Village, so he advised, "Don't worry, the old man has already forgiven you. This time, you have made up for your mistake. No one will make things difficult for you when you return to the village. Make things difficult for me." After a light snort, Orochimaru said with a face of ridicule, "Do you think I still care about this now?" After knowing the secret identity of Hyojin as the leader of Amatsukami, Orochimaru was not afraid of any pressure from any side. It was just that for people like him, it was not a pleasant thing to be sheltered by a disciple. What's more, with the revelation of Hyojin's mysterious identity, many of the doubts that had been troubling him in the past were suddenly solved. Why did Amatsukami's Homusubi sneak into Hiriko's ceremony and watch Hiriko's Kekkai Genkai ceremony? Why did Amatsukami help Danzo to further develop the Chimera technique? Why did Danzo mysteriously disappear? Why did Amatsukami collect the Grayer Mine, Sky Spear, and other chakra sources? Why did Amatsukami break the undead demon seal of 4 generations Naruto and take away half of the 9 tails sealed in Yondaime Naruto's body? In the past, these doubts had left Orochimaru with no clue, because Amatsukami's performance was too strong, and their leader, Yama, was the one and only deity in the shinobi world at that time, and Hiriko's Kekkai Genkai ceremony had obvious flaws, so he instinctively ruled out the possibility that Amatsukami was planning the Kekkai Genkai ceremony, thinking that perhaps one of the members of Amatsukami was interested in Hiriko's Kekkai Genkai ceremony. It could be said that Hyojin's superb performance and the invincible persona of Yama had seriously interfered with Orochimaru's judgment, causing him to miss the correct answer. Now that Orochimaru knew the secret identity of Hyojin as Yama, he naturally understood that Hyojin had been eyeing Hiriko's Kekkai Genkai ceremony for a long time, and it was most likely because of the Kekkai Genkai ceremony that he obtained the power of a deity today. The temptation of a deity's power was simply irresistible to Orochimaru. The only thing he can't figure out at the moment is how did Tenseigan manage to recruit so many loyal Kage and even Super Kage level members of Amatsukami? How did Tenseigan manage to recruit so many loyal Kage level members of Amatsukami? If it weren't for so many powerful members of Amatsukami who never failed, the invincible persona of the leader of Amatsukami wouldn't be so deeply rooted in people's hearts. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At this time, Yakushido, Kimimaro, Yugo, and Yamato gathered around Orochimaru. Because of Yugo's treatment, Yakushido's injuries have been healed, while Yugo's body has become smaller due to the loss of too many cells. Glancing at his subordinates, Orochimaru ordered, "Follow me." Whoosh. After saying that, Orochimaru's figure flashed, and he dashed in the opposite direction of my village. Without hesitation, Yakushido and the others immediately followed, disappearing from Jiraiya and Tsunade's sight. "Orochimaru, where are you going?" Jiraiya shouted, but he didn't get any response. Tsunade seemed to have thought of something, and she said doubtfully, "Could it be that this guy has his eyes on Nagato's eyes?" Before this, Tsunade had noticed that Orochimaru had been secretly observing the strange eyes in Nagato's eye sockets. Especially when Nagato was attacked and fainted, Orochimaru had been restless several times. Therefore, Orochimaru's strange behavior immediately reminded her of Nagato's eyes. Is he crazy? Why is he still thinking about this at a time like this? Jiraiya felt helpless. After saying that, he wanted to catch up and stop Orochimaru from attacking Nagato. After all, Nagato was his disciple, and he had just helped the Ninja Coalition army. Whoosh! At this moment, another turbulent torrent came from the sky, sweeping the entire battlefield with a loud rumble. Tsunade and Jiraiya, the two powerful ninjas who shocked the ninja world, were instantly swept into it like ants. Then, a truth-seeking ball suddenly flew out of nowhere and smashed into the ground not far from Tsunade and Jiraiya. Boom! In an instant, accompanied by a dazzling light, the entire ground was blasted up and turned upside down. Tsunade and Jiraiya felt like they were riding a roller coaster. With the violent ups and downs of the ground, they violently bumped up and down and were shaken out in a burst of earth shaking. When they recovered, they were so dizzy that they couldn't tell the direction for a while. Damn it! Jiraiya climbed up from the ruins with difficulty. Tsunade, who had just climbed up from the ruins, looked over and immediately exclaimed, "Your face! What's wrong with my face?" As Jiraiya said that, he touched his face subconsciously, but as soon as he touched his face, his hand was covered with blood. At this time, his face, eyes, nose, mouth, and even his ears and other organs on both sides were bleeding. It was obvious that he had suffered a serious shock and suffered internal injuries. "We can't stay here any longer, or we'll all die," Tsunade said resolutely and decisively. Not to mention Jiraiya. Even she, who had the bloodline of the Thousand Hand clan, was faintly unable to support. The battle between immortals was too terrible. Even if they were strong, they would die if they were not careful. So in addition to running for their lives, Tsunade couldn't care about anything now. Jiraiya was still a little worried. "But Nagato," Tsunade curled her lips. "Don't worry, your disciple is much stronger than you." Jiraiya was suddenly speechless. On the other side, Kakashi, who had retreated to the village gate, handed the unconscious guy to Mute, who was a medical ninja, and organized a ward team to set up a defensive ward around the village. Asma, who was on the side, looked at the distant sky. Is it my illusion? Why do I feel that every blow from Jean and Obsidian is almost as powerful as Guy after he activates the 8 Hidden Gates formation? Kakashi shook his head. No, it's not an illusion. Kurenai was surprised. Is it possible that every blow from them has the power of Guy opening the Gate of Death? Kakashi nodded with a serious face. Judging from their speed and strength, it is so. Because of the transplanted 3 Tomo Sharingan, coupled with his rich experience, it is not difficult for Kakashi to judge that in terms of speed and strength alone, Hyojin and Obsidian have the power to open the Gate of Death. In other words, the Gate of Death, the forbidden gate that burns life in the eyes of ordinary ninjas, is a normal state for Hyojin and Obsidian who have changed their life level. Is this the power of immortals? After a pause, Asma said with a look of unwillingness, "When did Jean and Obsidian become so strong?" Kurenai sighed. "I finally believe the legend that the world was destroyed because of the war between immortals. Yes, I used to think that those are just legends." After a pause, Asma looked at the busy enchantment team nearby and said with some worry, "Can the enchantment stop them?" Kakashi shook his head. Obviously, as long as Hyojin and Obsidian insist on fighting in the vicinity, no matter what kind of enchantment they set up, it will be difficult to guarantee the safety of my village. High in the sky, in the turbulence of the torrent, after a confrontation, Hyojin and Obsidian confronted each other again. Although the fight just now only lasted for a few dozen breaths, the two sides have attacked each other for dozens of rounds, and the surrounding air has a burnt smell because of the violent friction. At this time, Hyojin glanced at the ground, looking at the huge pit with a diameter of hundreds of meters because of the explosion of the truth-seeking ball. His face was slightly shocked. That truth-seeking ball was obsidian's. During the confrontation just now, Hyojin didn't pay much attention to it and casually sent it flying. He didn't think that it would cause a huge pit on the ground, as if it had been hit by a meteorite. In fact, after reaching the true 6 Daos level, the use of the truth-seeking ball plummeted. This was because the truth-seeking ball couldn't kill a 6 Daos level powerhouse. Therefore, to a 6 Daos level powerhouse, the truth-seeking ball was just an extremely condensed chakra that could change at will. This was also the reason why Hyojin easily sent Obsidian's truth-seeking ball flying. It's just that Kuroto obviously hasn't fully adapted to the changes in his strength, and the truth-seeking ball that doesn't pose any threat to him is an ultimate weapon that can easily destroy an entire forest. His careless action just now is likely to accidentally injure the survivors on the battlefield. For him, whose level of life had already changed, many insignificant things could affect the life and death of countless people. Withdrawing his gaze, Hyojin focused on what was in front of him. In addition to the Rinnegan in his eye sockets, Obsidian also has the Eye of the Moon between his eyebrows, as well as his own Manjikyu Sharingan transplanted into the palms of his hands. Not counting the power of Jubi, Obsidian has at least mastered 2 space-time ninjutsu, Kimui, and Luin Grave Edge Prison. He can activate the 6th Dao level Susanoo and the 6th Dao level Chibaku Tensei, as well as the forbidden technique Izanagi that can fool fate. Coupled with years of suffering, his physical training has become very good, so Obsidian doesn't have any obvious shortcomings. Although Kekkei is stronger than 6th Dao level in terms of level, but in terms of specific combat power, the advantage of Kekkei over 6th Dao level is not so significant. This point can be clearly seen from Otsutsuki Kagaya's successive defeats to Otsutsuki Yui, Otsutsuki Himura brothers, as well as Naruto and Sasuke. Kekkei is by no means a brainless win against a 6th Dao level. If the tactics are not used properly, then they will still lose. Obsidian, who has opened the Eye of the Moon, belongs to the peak of 6th Dao level. Compared to the incomplete 6th Dao level Naruto and Sasuke, who received the gift from the 6th Dao level sage in the original space-time, Hyojin's advantage over Obsidian does exist, but it is not significant. While Hyojin was examining Obsidian, Obsidian was also secretly examining Hyojin. After the test just now, he found that he was at a disadvantage in terms of taijutsu, and the truth-seeking ball that he used very smoothly before was completely ineffective against Hyojin. This made him a little uncomfortable for a while. Suddenly, Hyojin activated the Tenseigan and entered the Tenseigan chakra mode. His whole body was wrapped in a blue Tenseigan chakra. Do you know? After a pause, Hyojin raised the corner of his mouth. The thing that Tenseigan is not afraid of is a head-on confrontation. With that said, the 9 truth-seeking balls that lingered around Hyojin flew into his hands one by one and condensed into a dazzling golden sword. Although the Tenseigan does not have the space-time ability, the Tenseigan chakra mode can deeply develop and use the truth-seeking ball. Therefore, the truth-seeking ball that has become useless in a confrontation of the same level can still be a magic weapon in the hands of the Tenseigan owner. Therefore, in a head-on confrontation, the Tenseigan is fearless. Watching Hyojin enter the Yama's signature Tenseigan chakra mode, holding the dazzling golden sword in his hand, the corner of Obsidian's eyes twitched slightly. Immediately, his face sank. "You're playing this trick with me again? You still want to trick me like before? Don't think that I can't feel it. The chakra in your body is not abundant. Did you find out?" Hyojin smiled and immediately stretched out his left hand in the direction of the moon with a calm face. Obsidian suddenly looked stunned and looked nervously at Hyojin's left hand, not understanding what Hyojin was going to do. Phew. However, a minute passed and nothing happened, only the night wind blowing gently. The 2 people who were confronting each other were a little embarrassed. Hyojin, who was a little embarrassed, glared at the moon and said, "Think carefully." A big chapter of 4,400 words, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. In addition, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 1374. There's no doubt that when Otsutsuki Samurai also obtained a pair of single Tenseigan, his control over the giant Tenseigan on the moon has been enhanced to the extreme. It can be said that he is the indisputable highest authority of the giant Tenseigan, no one else. Therefore, even if he is isolated by Xiang Li's pupil technique in the Senjutsu River of the Styx, the giant Tenseigan on the moon still maintains a very high degree of loyalty to him. It did not respond to the call of Hyojin without anyone restraining it as before. This is obviously a little beyond Hyojin's expectations. He thought that with his Kekiai net realm, it is enough to surpass the authority of Otsutsuki Samurai. However, in the case of the same Tenseigan possessor, the giant Tenseigan on the moon obviously values bloodline more. In other words, once Otsutsuki Samurai has the Tenseigan, as long as he is still alive, the giant Tenseigan of the Otsutsuki clan will not betray him. Just like the giant Tenseigan of the Hyuga clan in the Sky Fortress, it is impossible for it to betray Hyojin. After waiting for a few more breaths, there was still no response from the Tenseigan on the moon. Hyojin looked indifferent and whispered, "Have you made your choice? Well, then I will fulfill your loyalty." The obsidian on the opposite side was confused and asked coldly, "Hyojin, what tricks are you playing?" Hyojin ignored the obsidian, but glanced at the My village not far away, which is struggling to support in the storm and may be overturned at any time, and his eyes stayed on his expensive Naruto rock sculpture for a moment. This place is still too close to the village. Then he thought to himself, fighting with the obsidian here, the aftermath of the battle may destroy the entire village if he exerts a little force, which is too restrictive for him, and there is no way to play the advantages of his Kekiai net and Tenseigan chakra mode. However, such restrictions did not exist for the obsidian. Therefore, this kind of one-sided restraint was very disadvantageous to Hyojin. He had to change the battlefield to another place so that he could get rid of obsidian freely. However, obsidian was not an idiot. There was no way he wouldn't realize this. He wouldn't let Hyojin change the battlefield so easily. With a thought, Hyojin had an idea. He said to the obsidian, "Don't run if you have the guts. Wait for me here. I'll be right back." After saying that, through the weak connection between his Tenseigan and the giant Tenseigan on the moon, he located the exact location of the giant Tenseigan and launched Yomibaira Ban, directly opening a space portal leading to the Otsutsuki clan lookout on the moon where the giant Tenseigan is worshipped. Then, without waiting for the obsidian's reply, he hurriedly got into the space portal. Seeing Hyojin leaving in such a hurry, the obsidian instinctively wanted to chase after him, but he hesitated again and said, "Is he trying to trick me into changing the battlefield? Or am I right, and he is in a hurry to replenish chakra? If it is the former possibility, rushing to chase after him will undoubtedly fall into Hyojin's trap and be led by the nose by Hyojin. But if it is the latter possibility, if he doesn't chase immediately, Hyojin may use this time to replenish chakra." For a while, the obsidian fell into a dilemma. On the moon, while the obsidian was in a dilemma, Hyojin crossed the space portal and came to the lookout where the Otsutsuki clan worships the giant Tenseigan. Soon, the giant Tenseigan of the Otsutsuki clan attracted his attention. Looking at this bright Tenseigan that is 6 or 7 stories high and seems to contain infinite chakra, even Hyojin, who has been promoted to Kekiai net, couldn't help but sigh. As expected of the giant Tenseigan that gathers the Byakugan of the entire Otsutsuki clan on the moon, it is really amazing. There's one thing, in terms of chakra fluctuations. The giant Tenseigan of the Hyuga clan in Hyojin's hand can't be compared with the giant Tenseigan in front of him at all. The two are not on the same level at all. The giant Tenseigan of the Hyuga clan is just a collection of hundreds of pairs of Byakugan, While the giant Tenseigan of the Otsutsuki clan is undoubtedly a collection of thousands of pairs of Byakugan of the Otsutsuki clan. Not to mention that the purity of the Byakugan of the Otsutsuki clan on the moon is generally higher than that of the Hyuga clan in the shinobi world. Just the number of Byakugan that constitutes the giant Tenseigan is like heaven and earth. However, no matter how bright and amazing this giant Tenseigan is, as long as it can't be used by Hyuga, it has no meaning to exist. Therefore, without any hesitation, Hyuga immediately raised his left hand towards the bright giant Tenseigan in front of him and decisively launched Rain Wheel Pull. Boom! The power of Kekkei Net burst out in an instant, and in just a moment, it completely overturned the Otsutsuki shrine where the giant Tenseigan is worshipped. And the giant Tenseigan that was directly hit by Hyuga's pupil technique flickered, the bright light gradually dimmed, and the chakra fluctuations also became chaotic. Ordinary attacks that hit the giant Tenseigan will be instantly absorbed by the giant Tenseigan, even if it's a six-path attack. After the end of the Fourth Shinobi World War in the original story, Naruto, who obtained the power of the six-path, once attacked the giant Tenseigan directly, but the result was in vain. In the end, it was only after Hinata's Byakugan chakra mixed in that the giant Tenseigan caused substantial damage. And Hyuga's attack with the Tenseigan is undoubtedly more fatal to the giant Tenseigan. Boom. After just a few breaths, the giant Tenseigan that was dimmed to the extreme suddenly exploded, and as Hyuga expected, it disintegrated into countless Byakugan that emitted a glowing halo. The secret technique of turning a large number of Byakugan into a giant Tenseigan has long been lost. After the giant Tenseigan was shattered, neither Hyuga nor Otsutsuki Samurai could restore it. In the original story, Otsutsuki Samurai couldn't restore the giant Tenseigan that was shattered by Naruto and Hinata. So under normal circumstances, shattering the giant Tenseigan means destroying a treasure. However, Hyuga is obviously not a simple destroyer. Looking at the countless Byakugan floating in front of him, he once again activated Yomi Bairoban and opened a space door leading to the power room of the Sky Fortress, and then waved his hand and used Rain Pull to send all these Byakugan into the deep space door. Since the giant Tenseigan of the Otsutsuki clan has made a choice, then he can only decompose this giant Tenseigan, and then use the decomposed Byakugan as nourishment to feed his own giant Tenseigan. As for the choice of this giant Tenseigan, Hyuga is not too disgusted, because this shows that the giant Tenseigan will not simply choose its master based on strength. And no matter where, loyalty is undoubtedly a precious quality. River Styx, Sanjitsu, River Otsutsuki Samurai, who was communicating with the giant Tenseigan and trying to return to the shinobi world, suddenly opened his eyes, and a look of horror appeared on his face. What's going on? A panic that he had never felt before surged in his heart, because he suddenly couldn't sense his giant Tenseigan. Being trapped in the River Styx, he is actually not helpless. After all, as long as his strength reaches the edge of Six-Path Realm, it is not impossible to forcibly break the space barrier. One must know that guy, who has opened the gate of death, can distort the space with pure physical strength. Therefore, as long as there is a giant Tenseigan in the shinobi world as a positioning coordinate and opens the space barrier at the other end for Otsutsuki Samurai, he can use his Tenseigan to forcibly break the space barrier on this side, resonating with each other and escaping back to the shinobi world. However, in the middle of communicating, the giant Tenseigan suddenly lost its sense, which made him completely dumbfounded. Could it be him? Soon, Otsutsuki Samurai realized something. Ordinary people don't even know that there's a giant Tenseigan on the moon, let alone find it. And even if they find it, there is nothing they can do about it. The only one who can find the giant Tenseigan so quickly and pose a threat to it is the mysterious Hyuga, who also has a Tenseigan. With a plop sound, Otsutsuki Samurai fell to the ground and looked at the slowly flowing river Styx in front of him with a dull face. He can't return to the shinobi world for the time being, but he doesn't care much. With the Tenseigan, He can always find a way to escape. But when he thought that the clan's treasure, the giant Tenseigan, may be threatened or even destroyed, he felt a burst of despair. The pride of the noble Otsutsuki clan also collapsed at this moment. On the moon, Hyojin was busy sending all the Byakugan back to the Sky Fortress and integrating them into his giant Tenseigan. Not far away, a twisting vortex appeared, and then Obsidian's figure walked out of the vortex. Looking around vigilantly, Obsidian asked, "Where is this place?" Obviously, Obsidian directly tracked Hyojin through the traces of Yomibirasuka, so he doesn't know where he is at the moment. Hyojin quietly shifted the last Byakugan away and said, "Sure enough, he's still chased after me, but it's a little slower than I expected." Humph, pretending to be a ghost. After a light snort, Obsidian directly launched Shinra Tensei. Rumble, in an instant, the ruins of the lookout, Otsutsuki Samurai's palace not far away, and even the rocks on the surface of the moon were all blown away by Shinra Tensei. And as the dome was overturned, revealing the deep starry sky outside, Obsidian was stunned. This is the moon. At this time, Hyojin, who had completed the last transfer of the Byakugan and closed the space door, raised the corner of his mouth, and then, with a bang, the ground under his feet shattered, and like an arrow leaving the bow, he rushed towards Obsidian. Obsidian's face changed, and he hurriedly put away his surprise, waving the truth-seeking ball that had transformed into a staff in front of him. Boom! In a loud noise, the two people who collided with each other rushed out of the moon through the broken gap and came to the surface of the moon. They did not stop to appreciate the depth of the universe, nor did they overlook the shinobi world from the surface of the moon. The two people who were entangled with each other completely entered a state of selflessness, venting the power of immortals in space without any scruples. My village. Looking at Hyojin and Obsidian who disappeared into the sky, Kakashi looked confused. Where did they go? Asuma shook his head. The perception class didn't find them either. Kuroto breathed a sigh of relief and said, "They should have gone to another place to fight." Kuroto must be very clear that if they fight near the village may not be able to survive. Not far away, several Kage were also looking for the figures of Hyojin and Obsidian. This ultimate battle between Hyojin and Obsidian is related to the future of the shinobi world, so they can't ignore it. 3 generations Tsuchikage asked the 3 generations Naruto next to him. Still haven't found them? 3 generations, Naruto replied. There is no trace of them within 100 miles. 4 generations Liang was a little puzzled. Then where did they go? At this time, everyone looked up at the night sky, because in the night sky, next to the bright moon, an incomparably dazzling golden sword appeared. They fought to the moon. The people in the village looked at each other for a while. In the universe, Hyojin, who was wielding the golden wheel reincarnation explosion formed by 9 truth-seeking balls, was invincible and easily cut off the truth-seeking ball held by Obsidian with 1 sword strike. This, Obsidian suddenly turned pale with fright. Hyojin didn't stop and took advantage of the situation, once again waved the golden sword in his hand and slashed at Obsidian. Even if the chakra in his body is not abundant, he is still a veritable Kekiai net. In his current state, there is no problem for him to fight for a few days and nights. What's more, with a large number of Byakugan continuously integrated into his giant Tenseigan, his giant Tenseigan began to become stronger and larger. Seeing Hyojin slashing at him again, Obsidian became more and more flustered and subconsciously shrank his body and hid in the Kamui space. The eye of the moon in between Hyojin's eyebrows shone brightly, and Yomibirasuk followed like a shadow, and the portal directly opened above the twisted vortex of Obsidian's Kamui, and his whole body also rushed into the Kamui space. Rumble. Hyojin, who chased into the Kamui space, slashed with his sword, and in a loud noise, the stone platforms in Obsidian's Kamui space were instantly smashed into pieces. And just at the moment when the sword light was about to touch Obsidian, Obsidian's figure flashed, and he left the Kimui space and appeared in a desert in the shinobi world. Immediately afterward, Hyojin's sword light also passed through a deep space portal, chased out of the Kimui space, and stabbed at Obsidian's back. Obito had no choice but to switch places with the Luon Moot doppelganger that he had just separated from and narrowly avoided the golden sword. The Luon Moot doppelganger that he switched places with was instantly pierced by the golden sword and shattered. At this time, Hyojin also crossed the space portal and came to this strange desert. Obsidian looked at Hyojin in surprise. "How can you be so strong?" The truth-seeking ball that transformed into a monk's staff was instantly cut off like a wooden stick. The solid Kimui incarnation was easily torn apart like a piece of paper, and even the space couldn't stop Hyojin's pursuit. Obsidian was really shocked. Hyojin smiled slightly and said, "Are you confused? This is the Kekii net. 4002-in-1. Please vote. Monthly vote. Also, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone." Chapter 1375. Kekii Net. A trace of doubt flashed on Obsidian's gloomy face. The concept of six-path level was first thrown out by Hyojin, so he naturally doesn't know what Kekii Net is, but from the word Kekii Net, he immediately inferred that the Kekii Net that Hyojin mentioned should have a similar meaning to Kekii Limit and Kekii Elimination. However, the power of Kekii Net is obviously far beyond Kekii Limit and Kekii Elimination. He doesn't have Jubi, so how did he do this? Is it just because of his Tenseigan? Gradually, the doubts in Obsidian's heart became more and more. Until now, he still can't believe that Yama of Amitsukami, the deity that suppressed the shinobi world for more than 10 years, is actually Hyojin, the last of his generation. The huge sense of absurdity made him feel like he was in a space-time dislocation. After collecting his thoughts, he stared at Hyojin. In his normal state, Hyojin's speed and strength are slightly above him, and after entering Yama's signature Tenseigan chakra mode, this gap was further widened. Coupled with the almost invincible golden sword in Hyojin's hand, even the truth-seeking ball can be cut in half. This made him feel fear from the bottom of his heart. Of course, what made him panic the most was the failure of Kimui. In the past, no matter how powerful the enemy was, no matter how complicated the situation was, as long as he hid in the Kimui space, he could safely escape from the battlefield. Now that the God's might had lost its effect, the safe haven in his heart had also disappeared. A sense of insecurity, as if there was nowhere to hide, instantly filled his heart, causing him to uncontrollably feel fear and uneasiness. Hyojin, who was also observing Obsidian, noticed the flash of panic in Obsidian's eyes and said, "Hey, what's the matter? Why are you wavering so quickly?" "Hyojin, you bastard, are you pitying me? Don't look at me like that. Why do you have to pity me?" As if provoked by Hyojin's gaze, the Obsidian became annoyed. Hyojin didn't answer. He just glanced at Naruto's Haori that was fluttering in the wind. Obsidian's expression froze. Then, he waved his hand and roared, "I don't care about Naruto. I am no longer the Uchiha Obsidian of the past." Hyojin raised his head slightly and looked down at the Obsidian. "Don't look at me like I'm at the bottom, you bastard." In an instant, the Obsidian was completely enraged by Hyojin's gaze. After roaring, 5 protruding horns immediately protruded from his back, piercing through his clothes. Strange red flames ignited on the horns one after another. This strange red flame was called Fire of the Cross, and it was the unique ability of the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. At the same time, the staff in his hand that had been transformed from the truth-seeking ball suddenly split open. Like a DNA sequence, it twisted and intertwined together, forming a uniquely shaped spear. This is the Heavenly Marsh Spear that was used by the Sage of the Six Paths when he created the world. It can represent the will of the Master, and is a divine sword that symbolizes faith and determination. Whoosh then, the fire of the cross behind the obsidian floated to the Heavenly Marsh Spear, and the red demonic flame instantly enveloped the divine sword that symbolized Obsidian's faith and determination. Looking at the Obsidian who was going all out and ready to fight to the death, Hyojin's mouth twitched slightly. Angering Obito was something he did on purpose, because this was the only way to make the Obsidian have a rebellious mentality and fight him head-on. Otherwise, if the Obsidian calmed down and used the mobility of the community to return to Mai again, or tracked the traces of the Yomi Hirasaka on the moon, or found the air fortress where the giant Tenseigan was placed, and so on, he would fall into a very passive situation. However, the chakra that Obsidian erupted at this moment was indeed a little beyond his expectations. The Ten Tails Jinchuriki was indeed not comparable to the ordinary Six Paths level. This was not only because the Ten Tails Jinchuriki could use the almost inexhaustible chakra of the Ten Tails, but also because the Ten Tails contained a lot of information about Otsutsuki Kagaya and the Sage of the Six Paths. For example, the Heaven Swamp Spear in Obito's hand was a technique that he had unearthed from the Ten Tails, allowing him to master the technique that a mortal of the Six Paths had used. Hyojin raised the dazzling golden wheel reincarnation explosion in his right hand. My sword is only loyal to cut off anything that I don't like. The Obsidian took a deep breath. You're still as annoying as you were back then. Are you still as stupid as you were back then? After a pause, Hyojin chuckled and said, "Some things really can't be easily changed." With that, Hyojin's left hand made a mark of opposition towards the Obsidian, just like during the shinobi exam. The Obsidian was stunned for a moment and immediately understood what Hyojin meant. He also made a mark of opposition towards Hyojin and said, "Don't worry, I won't do anything to the village before I get rid of you, bastard." Swish, swish. After completing the mark of opposition, the two of them no longer had any scruples and launched an attack at the same time. Rumble. In an instant, a dazzling golden sword shone in the desert, and with a roar, it split the desert into two. Then, the spear that was surrounded by red flames swept across, setting off a huge wave of air. It was as if the earth's crust was being pried open, and the entire land shook. Then, the sandstorm that filled the sky, under the chaotic influence of the disorderly suction and repulsion, entangled and collided with each other. Sometimes there was an earth-shattering roar, and sometimes there was a sharp, ear-piercing whistle. As the battle continued, the entire desert fell into chaos, and it was completely impossible to distinguish between left and right. Not only that, but even the space within it was also shattered due to the increasingly intense battle. Often, the dazzling golden sword could be seen intermittently, shuttling through the constantly flashing space door. Half of it was clearly here, but the other half appeared dozens of miles away. At the same time, the roaring red flames suddenly disappeared and then burst out in another place, burning the surrounding sand and gravel into nothingness. Soon, the battlefield was no longer limited to a corner of the desert. Hyojin's Yomi Baira Ban and Obsidian's Shunwei entangled with each other, causing the space to become chaotic, and suddenly opened a huge space door that led to an unknown sea. In an instant, Hyojin's golden wheel reincarnation explosion, accompanied by the flying sand, pierced from one end of the desert. Thousands of kilometers away, the sword pierced into the sea on the other end. Obsidian's figure flashed, and he barely avoided Hyojin's golden wheel reincarnation explosion. Then, 10 red, 10-tailed chakra arms stretched out from his body and took the opportunity to pull out an entire island from the sea near him, and then threw it at Hyojin. Hyojin did not dodge, and directly slashed, cutting the island thrown by Obsidian in half from the middle. Rumble, with a roar, the island that was cut in half by Hyojin's golden wheel reincarnation explosion fell into the desert on the other end of the space door thousands of kilometers away. Whoosh, Hyojin used body flicker technique, crossed the space door, and chased after the island to the sea on the other end. As the messy space doors slowly closed, the desert that was in a mess and filled with ravines gradually regained its peace. Only a few seabirds that were thrown over along with the island were cawing blankly in the yellow sand that filled the sky. My general headquarters. When Hygiene and Obsidian disappeared from the battlefield, the senior officials of the 5 great ninja villages immediately returned to the general headquarters. After the outbreak of the Fourth Shinobi World War, the 5 great ninja villages built a giant water ball in the general headquarters that could almost sense the entire shinobi world. As long as the huge chakra was in the shinobi world and was not blocked by the barrier, the water ball in the general headquarters could more or less sense it. Looking at the extremely deformed water ball in front of them like a gourd, the senior officials looked at each other. 4 generations laying asked, "What's going on?" Kaichi Yamanaka, who was in charge of perception, explained, 5th generation and Uchiha Obsidian Chakra is too big, so when it is reflected in the water ball, this will happen. Under normal circumstances, the water ball would be a regular sphere. After perceiving the chakra fluctuation, the water ball would cause a ripple according to the corresponding strength. At present, because Hygiene and Uchiha Obsidian's chakra fluctuation was too terrifying, the water ball formed a deformed gourd shape. 4 generations Lei Ying said impatiently, "I know what you're talking about. I'm asking you why the protruding position on the water ball is constantly changing." Kaichi Yamanaka shook his head helplessly. "This, we're not too sure. If the height of the protruding position on the water ball indicated the strength of the perceived chakra, then the direction and position of the protruding position on the water ball represented the direction and position of the perceived chakra fluctuation. But at this moment, the protruding position on the water ball was constantly changing, and some were even at the top and bottom of the water ball, which was difficult to understand. For generations of Kazakage said, "Are they constantly traveling through space and time?" Hearing the speculation of 4 generations of Kazakage, everyone immediately looked at 2nd generation Naruto and 4 generations Naruto, who were good at the flying thunder god technique. 2nd generation Naruto shook his head and said frankly, "I'm not too sure. Under normal circumstances, a ninja's body can't support such a long-distance space travel." 4 generations Naruto nodded in agreement. The flying thunder god technique will determine the consumption based on the amount of chakra carried in the distance. So using the flying thunder god technique to move a short distance is not a problem. But using the flying thunder god technique to travel across countries or even across continents, the flying thunder god technique is not enough. This is not only because of the consumption of chakra, but also because the ninja's body strength can't support such a long-distance space travel. 3 generations of Tsuchikage said at this time, "This reminds me of the legendary battle of the world." 3 generations Naruto looked at 3 generations of Tsuchikage and said, "You mean the battle between the sage of the 6 paths and the ancestor of Chakra Kagaya?" "Yes." 3 generations of Tsuchikage nodded with a worried face. Because Amatsukami is involved with the legendary Otsutsuki clan. In order to investigate Amatsukami, the leaders of the 5 great ninja villages collected and sorted out the myths and legends of various countries. Among them, many ancient books vaguely mentioned that the sage of the 6 paths experienced a world-ending battle and defeated an evil god that threatened the shinobi world. Then, he founded the shinobi sect and spread chakra and ninjutsu to the shinobi world. And the evil god that was defeated by the sage of the 6 paths was Otsutsuki Kagaya, the ancestor of chakra. It is said that the battle lasted for several months, and the whole world was caught in the flames of war, so it was called the Battle of the World. At first, when these myths and legends were sorted out, the leaders of the 5 great ninja villages felt that myths and legends are just myths. There is no one in the world who can fight for several months and destroy the whole world. Even the legendary sage of the 6 paths is unlikely to be able to do so. But now, looking at Hygiene and Uchiha Obsidian shuttling back and forth in the shinobi world, fighting on the moon, the universe, the desert, and the sea, they suddenly realize that the so-called Battle of the World in the myths and legends may have really happened. Jiraiya said in a daze, "Is this the battle in the myths and legends?" Tsunade shook her head and said, "It should be said that we are experiencing a new legend." Zhuan Xiaochun was a little uneasy. Will it affect the village? If what is happening now is a replica of the Battle of the World in the myths and legends, then I might also be affected. After all, the Battle of the World in the ancient books lasted for several months, and even the mainland was shattered. After listening to Zhuan Xiaochun's words, the other Kage present were also worried about their respective villages. Asma scratched his head and said, "Sai, I don't know what realm Kurodo is it now, and whether he can defeat the obsidian who is transformed into the Jubi's Jinchuriki." Kakashi sighed. "Now we can only believe in Kurodo. For him, whether it is Hyojin or obsidian, they're both close friends whom he can entrust his life to. Now that the situation has developed to this point, he can be said to be the most distressed person." Itachi, who has already taken off the Homusubi mask, said with certainty, "Naruto-sama will not lose." Shinichi smiled without any burden and said, "Don't worry, boss will win." Everyone looked at Shinichi when they heard this, and Asma asked in confusion, "Why are you so sure?" Shinichi shrugged and said, "Can't you see? Boss will not appear in a situation that can't be handled. Since boss has appeared now, it means that it is not a big problem to deal with that bastard obsidian." Jishui smiled and said, "Senpai will never fail, please rest assured." Looking at Itachi, Shinichi, and Jishui, these kaleidoscopes, Uchiha's inexplicable trust in Hyojin, everyone felt that the originally familiar Hyojin has become a stranger. Kakashi secretly sighed and said, "How many secrets are hidden in Kurodo?" A 4,000-word 2-in-1 chapter, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. Also, thank you to the students who gave gifts today. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 1376. The World of Naruto in the Eyes of Reincarnation. Please take a leave of absence. Currently typing. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1377. Inside Naruto's spiritual world. Sitting cross-legged on a truth-seeking ball, the Six Paths deity looked at Naruto seriously. "You should know who I am now, right?" Although the old man with the reincarnation, I had been talking for a long time, Naruto was still confused. "Grandpa, can't you make it simpler? You still don't understand." After a pause, the Six Paths deity shook his head and said, "The barrier between us is due to the age difference. We live in different eras, and there are huge differences in cultural traditions and ethics. Even though I've learned the language of the new culture, but before the Six Paths deity could finish, Naruto shouted, "Grandpa, I don't have time to chat with you." The Six Paths deity said to himself, "I know you're in a hurry, but it's useless now. You have to understand." Naruto scratched his head and said, "I don't understand what you're talking about at all." "Grandpa, are you an alien?" The Six Paths deity's expression froze, and a ripple appeared on his old-fashioned face. He said, "Alien? That's too much." Naruto quickly said, "Please keep talking like that. I can understand you." The Six Paths deity then explained his identity with a strange expression. When he found out that the old man with the reincarnation eye and the truth-seeking ball was the legendary Six Paths deity, Naruto was shocked. "You're the Six Paths deity who created ninjutsu that teacher mentioned. So, you've heard of me before." After saying that, the Six Paths deity waved his hand and summoned the cactus staff that was floating beside him. Then he tapped it on the ground. In an instant, ripples appeared on the surface of the pond in Naruto's spiritual world. As the ripples spread to Naruto's feet, an unfamiliar figure was reflected on the surface of the water. The Hexapath Immortal floated in front of Naruto and said, "Do you see that? You're actually the reincarnation of my son, Azura." Azura. Naruto was stunned. The Sage of the Six Paths then told Naruto about his conflict with his mother, Otsutsuki Kagaya, in a language that Naruto could understand. Naruto curiously asked, "Sure enough, Mom is very scary when she's angry. But where did Hui come from? It doesn't matter where she came from. The hexapath immortal cleared his throat and said, all you need to know is that she was very powerful. She was once called the goddess of Mao and the primogenitor of chakra. After that, deity of the six paths talked about the 1,000-year dispute between his two sons, Indra of the Great Tube Tree and Azura of the Great Tube Tree. With that, the hexapath immortal looked at Naruto. I'm sure you've noticed the Azura's chakra in your body. Naruto's expression gradually became serious. With the growth of his strength and age, Kuroto's control of his own power has also fundamentally changed. So these days he has vaguely felt the tyrannical chakra in his body that does not belong to him, but is attached to his spirit body. Seeing Naruto's expression, the hexapath immortal said, so you've already noticed it. Then you should have guessed who the reincarnation of my brother Indra is, right? Sasuke. Naruto answered with certainty. In Sasuke's spiritual world, Sasuke, who was also asked the same question by the hexapath immortal, said without hesitation, it's Naruto, right? The hexapath immortal nodded. Yes. Before you, the reincarnations of Indra and Azura were Madara, Uchiha, and Hashirama. Sasuke's face sank. Madara, Uchiha, the hexapath immortal said helplessly, because of his excessive obsession with power, Madara seized the power of Hashirama and had the chakra of Indra and Azura at the same time. At the end of his life, he opened the Rinnegan. Sure enough, this is the way to open the Rinnegan. Sasuke was secretly happy because he had received a cell transplant and obtained the chakra of the first generation of Naruto. The hexapath immortal continued to sigh. This old man had already anticipated such a situation, so I purposely left behind a stone tablet, hoping that Indra would see it and turn over a new leaf. But now, it seems that the stone tablet didn't have much effect. Sigh. Stone tablet. Sasuke remembered that his brother Itachi had mentioned the stone tablet in the secret room of the Nanaka Shrine. Immediately, Sasuke asked the hexapath immortal, Hexapath immortal, are you just going to watch your son fight with his brother? Shouldn't you, the hexapath immortal, be the one to stop this? Sort of. After a moment of silence, the hexapath immortal talked about the differences between Indra and Azura. He emphasized, power can make people lose themselves. After my mother unified the world with her own power, she became more and more obsessed with power, which led to people beginning to fear her. She was originally called the goddess of light, but gradually, she became an evil god in people's eyes. Then, the hexapath immortal looked at Sasuke and said, once the power is concentrated in the hands of one person, the power will go out of control, and the person who controls the power will also sink into the power. Sasuke didn't agree with the hexapath immortal, but after listening to these words, he understood why the hexapath immortal divided the Jubi and established a shinobi sect to pass on his chakra to the world. The hexapath immortal continued. Madara is like this, almost the same as this old man's mother, Kagaya, and his son, Uchiha Obsidian, has now obtained the power of the Jubi. Not only is his strength close to this old man's, but he's also trying to control my mother's power. The infinite Tsukuyomi is not a simple genjutsu, but an evil technique that can enslave people and reunite everyone's chakra. Sasuke asked, did Kagaya use the infinite Tsukuyomi? The hexapath immortal nodded slowly. Well, the consequences are very tragic, so you must stop Uchiha Obsidian and Madara, otherwise, the shinobi world will be destroyed by them. In hesitation, the hexapath immortal didn't add Hyojin's name to the list, because it is already very difficult to deal with Uchiha Obsidian and Madara if Hyojin's strength is already above him. Then this task is almost impossible to complete. Therefore, even though Hyojin is not recognized by the hexapath immortal, he can only choose the lesser of two evils. And with the tailed beasts being used as weapons again and again, ninjas have been fighting with each other in the form of individuals, families, and even villages for thousands of years. He is not sure whether his idea of creating a shinobi sect and distributing chakra to the world is correct or not. At this time, in two different spiritual worlds, the hexapath immortal said to Naruto and Sasuke at the same time, "Stretch out your hands. This time I will entrust the power to you. What you will do, what kind of future the shinobi world will have, these are all up to you." On a towering snow-capped mountain, a dazzling golden light suddenly flashed, and then the majestic snow-capped mountain was cut in half by the golden light, collapsing in an incredible way. Rumble. The collapsing mountain and the rolling ice and snow mixed together, forming a raging avalanche that blotted out the sky and the earth, emitting a deafening sound. Amidst this terrifying avalanche that changed the color of the sky and earth, two ghostly figures, whose every move was accompanied by a sharp sonic boom, shuttled back and forth continuously. It was as if this terrible avalanche was just a splash of water in a pond for them. There is no doubt that the two figures who suddenly appeared on the big snow-capped mountain were not bystanders, but the two immortals, Hyojin and Uchiha Obsidian. Swish soon, the golden light flashed again, bypassing Obsidian's spear, and lightly cut on Obsidian's left shoulder. In an instant, blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Although he was already a six-path immortal and was the pillar of the 10 Tails, Obsidian's body still could not resist the golden wheel reincarnation explosion in Hyojin's hand. With just a slight cut, half of his shoulder was cut off by the golden light. Puff! After spitting out a mouthful of blood, Obsidian's expression froze, and he quickly spat out a blood-red crossfire at Hyojin. Hyojin suddenly raised his left hand, and with him, as the center, a strange purple flame ignited without warning within a range of hundreds of meters around him, fighting against the invading blood-red flame. In an instant, the two flames, which ignored the cold and ice and snow, burned each other, making the snow-capped mountain shrouded in cold mist look colorful, like a dream. At this time, Hyojin and Obsidian had left the snow-capped mountain one after another through the time and space ninjutsu, and broke into an unknown volcanic cave. Ignoring the boiling magma below, the two of them continued to fight in the belly of the volcano. The relatively narrow belly of the volcano was clearly unable to accommodate the fierce battle between the two of them. The shockwaves and torrents of air stirred up by their battle instantly shattered the sturdy walls around them, allowing the magma that was wrapped in pungent smoke to slowly flow out. In the battle, Obsidian became more and more frightened as he fought, and he was puzzled. Damn it, why is he getting stronger and stronger? I can't hold on any longer. Obsidian's feeling was not an illusion. As the battle continued, Hyojin, who had just completed the ritual and promoted to Kekkei-net, began to gradually adapt to the power of Kekkei-net. Therefore, as Hyojin became more and more familiar with the power of his Kekkei-net, the pressure on Obsidian's side naturally increased. In fact, in this battle, Obsidian had a very big advantage. The first reason is that Obito has already become a Jubi's Jinchuriki a few weeks ago and stepped into the true six-path realm, so he has enough time to adapt to the power of the six-path realm. Second, because Hyojin completed the ritual and was promoted to Kekkei-net, he rushed to fight Obsidian without stopping. Chakra, who was exhausted in the last stage of the ritual, had no time to recover. But even if there were many disadvantages, Kuroto's combat skills honed through many bitter battles, coupled with his Kekkei-net, which was above the six-path level, still allowed him to quickly gain the upper hand, and this advantage continued to expand. After all, actual combat is the best teacher. In Obsidian, a Jubi's Jinchuriki who is both durable and confrontational, can be said to be the best sparring partner that Hyojin can find in the current ninja world. The battle with Obsidian not only allowed him to quickly adapt to the power of Kekkei-net, but also gave him a very accurate understanding of his own speed, strength, insight, perception, and even the destructive power of various ninjutsu and pupil techniques. His understanding of the use of time and space pupil technique that he had just comprehended in Kekkei-net, as well as his understanding of space, has also made great progress in the short fight with Obsidian. From a certain point of view, Obsidian is both an opponent and a good whetstone. Boom! There was another bang, and a large area of the volcano collapsed again. Among the countless collapsed rubble, Hyogen, who was getting more and more comfortable, floated on the magma, looking at Obsidian in front of him, and said lightly, "Hey, is your so-called determination and will only at this level?" Obsidian panted heavily and gritted his teeth. "Don't be complacent." "I'm not complacent." After a pause, Hyogen said, "I'm just a little disappointed. I thought there would be a blood-boiling battle." "You bastard." Obsidian could see that Hyogen is telling the truth, but it is also because of this that he is extremely annoyed. Compared to the fear and hatred in the eyes of others, he hated the contempt in the eyes of others even more, especially from the same batch in front of him who was wearing Naruto's Haori robe, this person who stood at the bottom of the team with him. At this time, Hyogen shrank the golden wheel reincarnation explosion in his hand to only 1 meter long. With the infinite concentration of power, even Obsidian, who has the Rinnegan, can't help but feel dazzled when he looks directly at the golden sword in Hyogen's hand. Hyogen said slowly, "Obsidian, hand over the 10 tails now, and I will give you a decent ending. This is my last advice to you as a fellow student, and also your last chance. How can I admit defeat to you?" After roaring, Obsidian suddenly activated the 10,000 nature attraction, pulling Hyogen down into the boiling magma below. However, the magma, which is a forbidden zone for life, did not cause any substantial damage to the 2 people who fell into it. One of them was wrapped in the Tenseigan chakra, and the other was wrapped in the 10 tailed beast coat. The hot magma was no different from thick mud to them. The 2 fought all the way to the depths of the volcano, and then directly left the underground through the portal. Unlike the battle between the Otsutsuki Yui and the Otsutsuki Himura brothers against Kaguya 1,000 years ago, the battle between Hyogen and Obsidian is more fierce and more flexible. This is because whether it is Kaguya or the Otsutsuki brothers, they can be regarded as natural gods, and almost all of them have the power of 6-path levels since birth. In the process of growing up, they have not encountered any strong enemies, nor have they experienced life and death battles. They lack both combat experience and mastery of their own power. It can be said that the battle between the mother and son was the first real life and death battle in their lives. Therefore, although they have all kinds of terrifying dojutsu, ninjutsu, secret jutsu, and forbidden jutsu that others can't even imagine, the process of the battle is nothing to write home about, and they're not even as good as ordinary genin. That's why the battle lasted for several months, turning the world upside down and shattering the continent. On the contrary, both Suijin and Obito have gone through hundreds of battles. From the humble shinobi of an ant, they have reached their current realm step by step. Therefore, as they are not born gods, they know better how to use their own advantages and how to find the enemy's flaws. What kind of tactics to choose, what kind of timing to choose, and so on are almost engraved in their bones, forming an instinct. It's not that they can't turn the entire shinobi world upside down like the battle between the Otsutsuki brothers and Kaguya, shattering the earth and plunging the people into misery and suffering. They who have better control of their own power just think that there is no need to squander chakra like that. But even so, the 2 of them are still like a walking natural disaster. No matter where they fight, that area will be shattered into pieces. But once one side has the advantage, this advantage will quickly accumulate, just like Hyogen at this time. The Otsutsuki brothers and Kaguya fought for several months before the winner was gradually determined. But Hyogen and Obsidian only fought for a moment, and the situation began to become clear. Soon, the fight turned into a chase. Obsidian used Kimui to escape all the way and finally returned to the territory of the Land of Fire, and Hyogen followed closely behind Obsidian. After another confrontation, Obsidian's back was cut by Hyogen's golden sword, leaving a long wound. However, Obsidian turned a blind eye to the shocking wound on his back and continued to escape while observing Hyogen from time to time. There's only one chance. Obsidian's eyes gradually darkened. Now it is difficult for his other skills to cause substantial damage to Hyogen. Only the 6-path level Earth Blow Tensei can hope to reverse the situation. Like Obsidian, Hyojin is also looking for opportunities. Just after Hyojin and Obsidian once again entered the territory of the Land of Fire, in the distance, Uchiha Madara and Zetsu came to a high cliff and watched from afar. Uchiha Madara crossed his arms over his chest. Humph! A good battle. Even I can feel the blood surging. White Zetsu said at this time. Madara, strictly speaking, you are still a dead man. You can't feel the temperature of blood. Uchiha Madara's face darkened, and he stared at White Zetsu. White Zetsu suddenly shrank his head and whispered, I can't feel it in the first place. Suddenly, a roar came from the distant battlefield, and at the same time, a dazzling golden light flashed. Uchiha Madara quickly looked over and found that there was a huge sphere in the distant sky. This sphere was still rapidly absorbing the soil on the ground, getting bigger and bigger, rising higher and higher. Under the huge sphere, Obsidian's body was broken in two, and Ten Tails was struggling to break out of Obsidian's body. 5,000 words. Please recommend. Monthly votes. In addition, thank you for the gifts yesterday and today. Chapter 1378. In a lounge next to the general headquarters, Tsunade, who was examining the injuries of Naruto and Sasuke, had a solemn expression on her face. Her brows were tightly knitted, and there seemed to be a hint of doubt in her eyes. Kakashi leaned over and asked with concern, How are they? Can they still be saved? 4 generations Naruto and Uchiha's people also looked nervously at Tsunade, waiting for the answer of the current number 1 medical ninja in the shinobi world. Tsunade shook her head. It's very strange. Strange? 4 generations Naruto was also puzzled. Well, it's very strange. After a pause, Tsunade explained to everyone. As a Jinchuriki, Naruto not only lost his tailed beast, but also suffered such a serious injury. It stands to reason that he should have died long ago. Sasuke's situation is similar. His sternum is completely shattered, and his broken ribs are directly inserted into the atrium, causing a fatal hemorrhage. Without exception, all the people present are experienced ninjas. So, just listening to Tsunade's description, they know how serious the injuries suffered by Naruto and Sasuke are. And with such serious injuries, it's impossible for them to survive, but the two of them are hanging on to their last breath, which is completely contrary to common sense. Itachi said in a deep voice, It is indeed a bit abnormal. At this moment, Naruto and Sasuke, who were in a deep coma, opened their eyes at the same time. Not only that, but their injuries were also recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone present was taken aback. However, the next scene shocked them even more. Naruto and Sasuke, who were still on the verge of death, not only recovered quickly, but the chakra fluctuations on their body also changed dramatically. Everyone was shocked to discover that Sasuke's left eye had turned into the reincarnation eye. Moreover, unlike ordinary Rinnegan eyes, there were 6 additional Magatama on the circular pattern of Sasuke's left eye. It looked somewhat similar to the Eye of the Moon between the eyebrows of Hyojin and Obsidian, except that there were 3 less Magatama compared to the Eye of the Moon, and the color was also the common light purple of Rinnegan eyes. The other side, countless black, truth-seeking balls suddenly appeared and hovered around Naruto. Kakashi subconsciously asked, What are you two doing? Tsunade also hurriedly asked, What happened? Naruto and Sasuke, on the other hand, lowered their heads and stared at the chakra mark in their palms in a daze. There is no doubt that both of them are a little confused at this moment. After all, knowing that they are the reincarnation of the son of the sage of the 6 paths, and also receiving the gift of the sage of the 6 path chakra, is too bizarre and absurd. Uchiha said indifferently, Although your performance is better than I expected, you are no different from Nagato. You are just a puppet used by me. Zetsu also followed Uchiha Madara to Obsidian's side. While admiring the 10 tails that was about to break free from Obsidian's body, he respectfully asked Uchiha, Madara, do you want to do it now? Do it. After a faint command, Uchiha Madara looked up at the huge sphere in the sky and said, "This time I won." At the beginning, as Uchiha, he challenged Naruto Hashirama and tried to re-establish the rules of the ninja world. The scene of that year is now repeated in the ninja world, but this time Uchiha has been replaced by Obsidian, and this time Naruto has been replaced by Fondarame-sama. Just as Uchiha Madara sighed, Black Zetsu quickly turned into a pool of black water and slowly merged into Obsidian's body. The masked man frowned. He was about to activate his divine aura and hide in the divine aura space. However, just as he was about to use his ocular technique, he suddenly realized that he couldn't move his body. Black Zetsu invaded Obsidian's body at this time and said with a smile, "Do you think you can get rid of Madara's control by removing the curse on your heart?" Obsidian's face changed. Only then did he realize that he deliberately borrowed Kakashi's hand to remove the curse left by Uchiha Madara on his heart. Black Zetsu actually knew it and left a secret method when he rescued himself. "Hey," Uchiha Madara, with his hands on his chest, chuckled disdainfully. Not long after, the black water turned into covered half of Obsidian's body and forcibly controlled Obsidian's hands to form the seal of Reincarnation Heaven technique. Obsidian could not resist at this moment. He could only let Black Zetsu control him to complete the seal little by little, but his face was no longer anxious and panicked. On the contrary, his expression gradually calmed down, just staring at the giant sphere in the air. Soon, as Obsidian was controlled by Black Zetsu to launch the Reincarnation Heaven technique, a large amount of steam came out of Uchiha Madara's impure body. His pale, impure body, which was full of cracks, gradually had the color of blood, and the false Rinnegan in the eye sockets also turned into flying ash and drifted away with the wind. It's a nostalgic feeling. Uchiha Madara took a long breath, and his face gradually showed joy. "Congratulations." Black Zetsu hurriedly complimented. Uchiha Madara did not hesitate at this time and immediately dug out the Rinnegan in Obsidian's eye sockets that belonged to him and then directly placed it in his own eye sockets. Subsequently, Uchiha Madara launched the pupil technique, pulled Jubi out of Obsidian's body, and sucked it into his own body. Black Zetsu also took advantage of this time to leave Obsidian's body, once again combined with White Zetsu on the side, and then stood behind Uchiha Madara with a respectful face. "Yes, that's the feeling. I feel power, endless power." Uchiha Madara, who completed the resurrection and had Jubi, laughed loudly. At this time, Obsidian, who was controlled by Black Zetsu to cast the Reincarnation Heaven technique, and Jubi was taken away by Uchiha Madara, also laughed. Uchiha Madara, who was complacent, frowned. "What are you laughing at?" Black Zetsu also cast a puzzled look. Obsidian smiled slowly and said, "Do you think I want to fight just now?" Boom! Before Obsidian's voice fell, there was a roar in the air, and then a dazzling golden sword pierced from the inside of the giant sphere floating in the sky, and then drew an arc, cutting the giant sphere in half in an instant. Uchiha Madara's eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of surprise in his eyes. Black Zetsu on the side was shocked. How is this possible? In his view, even Kagaya, the ancestor of Chakra, could not resist the seal of earthly bursting heavenly stars of the six-path level, not to mention Hyjin. Obsidian said with difficulty. Before I made a move, he had already predicted it. No, my attack should have been deliberately lured by him. And at the moment when I focused on launching earthly bursting heavenly stars, he cut my body first and used the pupil technique to remove my control over the 10 tails. Uchiha Madara instantly grasped the key of the problem. "So, you didn't launch the earthly bursting heavenly stars of the six-path level." Obviously, the current situation was entirely because Obsidian once again ignited the fire of war in the densely populated country of fire. Hyjin had to deliberately reveal a flaw to lure Obsidian to make a move, and then took the opportunity to determine the winner in an instant. Obsidian did successfully launch the earthly bursting heavenly stars, but before it was launched, Hyojin had already cut off his body and released the 10 tails in his body, making him fall from the six-path level realm. Therefore, Kuroto's Kekai Tensei is just an ordinary pupil technique of the Eye of Rinnegan, without the blessing of the power of the Jubi, and this is obviously meaningless for Kuroto, who is a Kekai net. Rumble, in the loud sound of gravel falling, the figure of Hyojin, wrapped in the Tenseigan chakra, appeared again. Hyojin, who was floating in the air, was thoughtful at the moment and muttered to himself, "This time, I finally figured out the principle of earthly bursting heavenly stars." On the ground, Uchiha Madara's expression gradually became dignified. Standing behind Uchiha Madara, Black Zetsu looked hesitant, as if he was weighing something. The first generation still spoils you too much. Suijin smiled, and with a flash, he once again rushed towards Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara, who was prepared, was not afraid, and immediately waved the staff changed by the truth-seeking ball to meet Hyojin. Clang! Just in an instant, in the surprise of Uchiha Madara, the staff changed by the truth-seeking ball was cut in two by Hyojin's golden wheel reincarnation explosion. This, not only Uchiha Madara was surprised, but also Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi, the second generation, the four generations, and Zetsu hiding in the dark were also surprised. In their understanding, the truth-seeking ball, which symbolizes the power of immortals, is unsolvable and indestructible, so they never thought that the truth-seeking ball would be so easily broken. Obsidian, who was barely hanging on, laughed at this time. Then, the golden sword in Hyojin's hand disappeared instantly, replaced by a ball of storm that was condensed to the extreme, shaped like a Rasengan. Boom! In an instant, Hyojin hit the storm in his palm on Uchiha Madara's abdomen, and with a roar, he was sent flying, plowing a long gully on the ground. Everyone's eyes instantly turned to look at him. Just this level, Uchiha Madara quickly got up from the ground and responded to Hyojin, but before he finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of blood. After that, every part of his body began to swell uncontrollably, as if there was some kind of airflow repeatedly striking inside his body. After that, a series of explosions rang out from his body, causing his skin to split open and blood to gush out. Obviously, what Hyojin used just now was not a Rasengan, but the silver wheel reincarnation explosion, which was highly condensed by 9 truth-seeking balls. With the gradual improvement of his control of the power of Kekkei Net, his control of the golden wheel reincarnation explosion and silver wheel reincarnation explosion was also rapidly improving. At this time, he is no longer satisfied with ordinary large-scale attacks. This was because once the power was dispersed, it would be very difficult to deal substantial damage to a 6-Daos enemy. Therefore, he tried to gather the scattered power and focus it on a single point to increase the power of his ocular technique. This way, he could deal effective damage to a 6-Daos enemy, or even a bloodline catcher level enemy. At this time, Hyojin walked slowly towards Uchiha Madara, while indifferently assessing the damage caused by the blow just now. At this time, Uchiha Madara was covered with blood, his body was like a leaking ball, he was lying on the ground. He didn't look like a Jubi's Jinchuriki, but more like a broken corpse. He looked very miserable. However, Uchiha Madara is a Jubi's Jinchuriki after all. With the help of the Jubi's power, his shocking injuries began to recover quickly. And he himself climbed up from the ground again, gasping and shouting, "Hyojin, among all the people I have fought with, you are unique. I would like to call you the strongest." With that, Uchiha Madara burst out with chakra and laughed wildly. "Let's have a real bloody war." The chakra that broke out from Uchiha Madara's body, as if it was substantial, set off a wave of turbulent air, so that all the onlookers felt a chill. Even Naruto and Sasuke, who have the power of the sixth path, were no exception. However, Hyojin, who was in the middle of the formation, was not affected at all. He turned a blind eye to the turbulent Jubi chakra, but slowly raised his hand to Uchimadura and said indifferently, "Now you are qualified to be defeated by me." The first one is here, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes.